The story kicks off in the massive, sparkling capital of the Harkya Empire. Little Ivy presses her face against the carriage window, absolutely mesmerized by the view. She and her guardian, the director, are taking in the majestic sights for the very first time. But of course, some snooty local nobles are already watching them. They start running their mouths, mocking Ivy and calling her a country bumpkin. Ivy hears their shade but completely brushes it off. The director doesn't care either, simply smiling and soaking in the beautiful scenery. She tells Ivy how refreshing it is to finally visit the bustling capital. They happily point out all the exotic fruits at the market, completely unbothered by the haters. Suddenly, a smug, balding noble approaches them with a mocking grin. He sarcastically tells them to take their time looking since country folks never get to see the palace. The director hits him with a polite smile and calmly agrees that there's no rush. Then she casually drops the bombshell that Ivy will actually be living at the palace. The noble scoffs, assuming they got scammed into some low-level maid job. But the director sets the record straight. She reveals that Ivy is actually enrolling in the prestigious Imperial Gifted Academy, absolutely flooring the snob. He stands there looking like a massive clown, totally speechless. The director proudly pats Ivy, knowing her little prodigy earned her spot. They celebrate her acceptance with a huge, wholesome hug. Ivy smiles, knowing she owes everything to the director's kindness. Flashback time, Ivy remembers the dark, miserable place the director saved her from. It all started at a rundown inn out in the middle of nowhere. A vicious, red-haired innkeeper practically tosses little Ivy onto the floor like a rag doll. The wicked woman screams at the poor girl for whining and not working hard enough. Trembling in fear, Ivy apologizes as the woman kicks her to the curb. But just as things look hopeless, the director steps in and fiercely shields the crying child. She checks on the shivering girl, horrified by how thin and frail she is. The director angrily calls out the wicked innkeeper for starving a 5-year-old. The nasty woman just crosses her arms, completely unbothered by the child's suffering. When the director asks to take Ivy away, the innkeeper gets a greedy glint in her eye. She claims she spent a fortune raising the kid and refuses to let her go for free. The wicked woman pretends to do some quick math. Then she drops an insane demand of 10,000 gold, which is basically daylight robbery. Ivy freezes in panic, not wanting to cause any trouble for the kind stranger. But without batting an eye, the director agrees to pay the ridiculous ransom. She stands tall and declares she's taking the child no matter the cost. The director gently pulls Ivy close, promising that her nightmare is finally over. They share a tender embrace, leaving the horrible inn behind forever. After that, Ivy moved into the director's workhouse, constantly cleaning to earn her keep. But life there was a struggle, as the orphanage barely had enough food to go around. Ivy regularly watched the other kids scrap over tiny rations of bread and potatoes. One day, a sweet older boy offers her his only piece of bread. Showing how pure-hearted she is, Ivy politely declines the offer with a bright smile. She claims she's full on wild strawberries, secretly wanting to reduce the burden on the struggling orphanage. Then she stumbles upon a life-changing piece of paper. It's an official recruitment flyer for the Imperial Gifted Academy. One specific detail immediately catches her eye. The academy provides free food, clothes, and shelter. Realizing this could save the director a ton of money, she hands in her application to take the test. She begs the director to let her go, determined to use her big brain to help her new family. That night, little Ivy looks out the window and prays, hoping to ace the exam and secure her future. In the quiet of the night, Ivy secretly folds her hands in prayer. She wonders if her real parents are dead or if they just abandoned her because they didn't need her. But deep down, she still desperately wishes to meet them at least once. Fast forward to the big day, they arrive at the front of the Gifted Academy. The director is completely amazed by the massive crowd, joking that the entire empire showed up. Suddenly, an examiner shouts for everyone to pay attention. He announces that all academy students must proceed inside alone without their parents. He strictly repeats that anyone who refuses to enter alone will be denied enrollment. Panic instantly sets in, and kids start bawling their eyes out in terror. The director realizes this is the very first time most of these sheltered kids are being separated from their families. But our girl Ivy, she is built different. She calmly turns to the director and politely says she's heading in. The adults around them are completely stunned by how incredibly composed this tiny girl is. Ivy brightly tells the director not to worry and promises to study hard. She even adds that she'll make sure to eat properly every day. The director tries to hold it together but ends up ugly crying right on the spot. Ivy looks up in total surprise, realizing her strong guardian is shedding tears for her. The director pulls her into a tight hug, promising to come running the second things get hard. A guard shouts that the academy gates will be closing shortly. With time running out, they exchange their final, heartfelt goodbyes. Ivy turns and bolts into her new future, ready to conquer the academy. Meanwhile, watching from a high window, an older minister remarks on how lively the campus is again. He spots tiny Ivy walking through the courtyard and questions her age. Suddenly, a snooty noble starts throwing a massive fit about her entering the school. He loudly complains that her grades don't meet the standard and whines about a 17-year-old being rejected for their age. The older minister quickly shuts him up for raising his voice like a fool. He firmly reminds the whining nobles that they are currently in the presence of the emperor. Time for a quick lore drop. The Gifted Academy is a special royal school directly under the palace. It was actually shut down for 7 years due to a messy succession war, but reopened this year to prove the empire is stable. But the real, heartbreaking reason it stayed closed all this time was because of Princess Ivbian. The emperor's beloved empress and his newborn daughter were tragically murdered during the chaos. The emperor deeply mourned the little girl whose face he never even got to see. After that, the grieving ruler would just stare blankly whenever he saw young children. Ambitious, greedy nobles tried to use this trauma to their advantage by enrolling their own kids to catch his eye. Catching on to their sick game, the emperor kept postponing the academy's opening. Finally, after all these years, he officially permitted it to reopen. Back in the present, Emperor Cloy's Arelkian Harkia sits silently at the head of the table. He calmly calls out to his Minister of State. He points to a crumpled piece of paper on the floor and orders him to bring it over. A sweaty official nervously hands over the discarded document. The official stammers that it's just a tossed application from an unqualified candidate. But the emperor reviews it and completely disagrees, seeing nothing lacking at all. The official panics, arguing that a workhouse kid has no business being there since the emperor is supposedly picking his adopted child this year. The emperor hits him with a massive death glare and coldly asks whoever said he was adopting a kid from the academy. He reminds the entire room that the academy's noble purpose is to nurture talented children. Then he absolutely cooks the official for making up fake rules just to eliminate qualified commoners. The emperor drops a massive bombshell to silence the haters. He reveals that the unqualified 7-year-old actually scored perfect marks on an upper-level graduation exam. The older minister is shocked, noting that the difficult test is usually taken by 15-year-olds. The other ministers quickly agree with the emperor's flawless logic. They shake their heads, totally disgusted that the snobby nobles are just treating the prestigious academy like a cheap social club. The snobby ministers are absolutely raging, shouting that they can't waste a precious academy spot on a workhouse kid. But the emperor just stares at her application with a subtle smirk. The Minister of State glances at her file, noting her quirky hobby is literally just cleaning. Without a second thought, the emperor boldly approves her admission, dropping a massive bombshell on the entire room. He casually stands up and tells them to handle the rest, leaving the nobles totally flustered. On his way out, he strictly orders the minister to process her admission fairly and reject nobody over social status. The second he leaves, the other nobles swarm the minister like hungry vultures, desperate to know if the emperor just picked an adopted child. Looking utterly exhausted, the minister tells them to chill out because the emperor only asked for fairness. He adds that the emperor didn't even care to ask for the kid's name, so they just need to get back to the meeting. Finally getting a look at the paperwork, he reads the accepted student's name, Ivy Alden. Meanwhile, little Ivy is greeted by a sweet staff member named Melody, who offers to show her the dorms. Ivy happily grabs her hand, super excited to follow her new guide. Melody kindly asks if her long journey from the countryside was exhausting. But Ivy just beams, saying it was actually amazing to finally see the capital. Melody's heart absolutely melts at how insanely cute this kid is. She hands Ivy a thick academy guidebook with a map inside to help her navigate. Melody warns her that the campus is massive and confusing, so she shouldn't hesitate to ask for directions. Ivy confidently agrees, already hyper-focused on the pages. Melody tells her to take her time reading, but Ivy instantly slams the book shut and declares she memorized the whole thing. She politely thanks Melody, leaving the poor woman completely confused. Melody is absolutely baffled that a 7-year-old just speedread the entire manual. She realizes that even for the Gifted Academy, this kid's brain is on another level. When Ivy tries to hand it back, Melody tells her to keep it since it's for students. Ivy hugs it tightly, so touched because it's the very first book she's ever owned. Melody laughs, promising her that this is just the beginning of her perks. She reminds Ivy that the academy covers all her food, clothes, and shelter completely for free. They finally arrive at her new dorm, and it's a gorgeous room with a garden view. Ivy runs around like a kid in a candy store, hyping up the huge desk and super comfy bed. Melody mentions a roommate will be moving in across the hall, making Ivy's heart race with excitement. Before leaving, Melody tells her to just wear her regular clothes until uniforms drop tomorrow and to head down for dinner later. Later that evening, Ivy happily skips down the stairs, pumped for her new life. She feels like she's living in a dream with her massive room and her very own book. She spots the dining hall and practically starts drooling, ready for a feast. But suddenly, a snooty boy spots her and sneers at the beggar-like commoner. He bitterly grumbles that if peasants like her weren't taking up spots, his brother could have enrolled. Clenching his fist, he gets irrationally angry that lower-class kids don't know their place. With an evil smirk, he decides to personally bully her out of the school. He stomps right up behind her, telling her beggars don't belong here. Out of nowhere, he violently shoves her right near the edge of the stairs. Ivy loses her balance and tumbles backward, screaming in pure terror. But suddenly, she realizes she hasn't hit the ground. The bully stares in shock. Ivy cracks an eye open, totally confused about why she isn't hurt. She starts blushing furiously, completely flustered by her situation. A ridiculously handsome boy with striking blue eyes has caught her right out of the air. He gently holds her and asks if she's okay, while Ivy is just mesmerized by his face. She stares at his eyes, thinking they're so beautiful she could literally get lost in them. Another red-haired kid runs up, worriedly asking if she's hurt. Flustered and embarrassed, Ivy quickly scrambles up, insisting she's totally fine and hating to be a burden. The snooty bully starts barking, angrily asking the two boys who they think they are to interfere. But the rest of the crowd starts whispering in absolute awe, totally starstruck that these famous, handsome elites actually enrolled this year. The bully immediately starts sweating bullets, realizing he just messed with the legendary Lord Arsel and Lord Luska. He collapses to the floor in pure terror, knowing these two are from the absolute highest tier of noble families. Crying like a giant baby, the bully screams an apology and scrambles away as fast as his legs can carry him. The red-haired noble yells that he's memorized his face, while the dark-haired boy turns his attention back to Ivy. He kindly tells her to report the jerk to a professor next time, but before Ivy can properly thank him, a massive mob of fangirls suddenly swarms them. The girls totally lose their minds, begging to eat with the two lords and violently shoving poor little Ivy out of the way. Pushed to the back of the mob, Ivy feels bad that she didn't even get to properly say thank you. She watches the absolute chaos, wondering just how insanely famous these two guys actually are. Deciding it's totally not worth being crushed, she decides to just slip away and thank them later. Meanwhile, the dark-haired lord watches her leave, secretly bummed because he actually wanted to chat with her. He already knows she's the legendary youngest student from LM City who matched his perfect score on the brutal graduation exam. A bit later in the dining hall, the two noble prodigies finally manage to find a quiet table to eat their massive feast. But peace never lasts long, and a group of blushing girls immediately asks to join them. Without missing a beat, the dark-haired boy coldly shoots them down, saying he wants to eat in peace. His red-haired friend sighs and tells him to be a little nicer, but the dark-haired boy completely ignores him. He casually takes a bite of his food before something catches his eye across the room. It's the tiny girl from earlier. Ivy is struggling to find an empty seat, getting rejected by snooty students who refuse to let her sit with them. Suddenly, she makes direct eye contact with her handsome saviors. The red-haired boy wonders if she's coming over, while the dark-haired boy instantly perks up. Ivy nervously walks up to their table and politely bows, finally giving them a proper thank you for saving her life. She asks if she can sit with them, and the dark-haired boy immediately agrees, but his red-haired friend completely ruins it. Trying to be a good bro, the red-haired boy politely rejects her, claiming his friend needs quiet time, leaving the dark-haired boy absolutely paralyzed with shock as Ivy walks away. The red-haired guy proudly puffs out his chest, completely oblivious to the fact that he just blocked his buddy. Fed up, the dark-haired boy grabs his tray, brutally telling his friend that he is absolutely useless in life. He storms off to find Ivy, leaving his clueless friend whining in the background. Meanwhile, Ivy decides to just grab a quick sandwich and eat outside, planning to totally avoid the lunch rush tomorrow. She wanders into the gorgeous garden she saw from her dorm window, enjoying the peaceful vibe. Following an amazing floral scent, she ventures a little deeper into the lush, glowing forest. Remembering her map, she realizes the Grand Imperial Palace is just beyond these trees and gets super curious. Since she has plenty of time before curfew, she decides to take a tiny detour to go exploring. She hesitates for a second, worried about getting caught, but her curiosity totally takes over. Crawling through the thick bushes like a stealthy little ninja, she pushes her way into a hidden clearing. When she finally pops out, her eyes widen in absolute shock at what she finds. Hidden away in the beautiful, sunlit clearing are two lonely gravestones. Ivy instantly starts sweating, realizing the Academy guidebook definitely didn't mention a secret graveyard. Knowing she stumbled somewhere strictly off limits, she quickly decides to turn back before she gets completely wrecked by the staff. But as she turns away, she notices the gravestones are covered in dirt and look super neglected. In a flash, the gravestone is sparkling clean, and Ivy instantly panics, realizing she just scrubbed it. Her ingrained habit from doing hardcore chores at her old workhouse just kicked in on pure autopilot. Freaking out that she tampered with a royal grave, she gets ready to sprint away, but then she suddenly freezes. The story suddenly cuts away to a flashback at the imperial palace under the dark moonlight. A much younger, furious emperor is demanding to know why his murdered wife and daughter can't be buried in the royal tomb. The slimy ministers explain that since the late emperor never gave his blessing, their names aren't in the registry, meaning they are totally disqualified. They cruelly remind him that his wife rejected a forced political marriage, meaning she is legally viewed as a complete outsider. The emperor's eyes glow with murderous rage, but instead of snapping, he coldly thanks them for giving him a brilliant idea. He boldly declares that since they are his family, there's absolutely no need to banish them to some distant royal graveyard. Clenching his sword, he vows to keep his beloved wife and daughter right by his side forever. He announces that the forest right inside the palace grounds will be their final resting place, leaving the stuck-up ministers absolutely gagged. As a minister desperately shrieks that there's no historical precedent for this, the emperor tightly grips his sword, ready to slice down anyone who dares to stop him. The massive sword slams into the table, bringing absolute silence to the room. The emperor coldly declares that anyone who raises their voice now is officially defying his command. Flashback over, back in the present, the handsome emperor walks toward the secret garden, noting that there must be fallen leaves to clear. He plans to start by cleaning the gravestones the second he arrives. But as he steps into the clearing, he spots something shining and completely spotless. He's instantly shocked, wondering who would dare touch the royal graves. Then he blinks in pure confusion, staring at a tiny blonde kid fast asleep on the ground. He angrily wakes her up, demanding to know how she got in and if she realizes it's past curfew. Ivy shoots up in a total panic, frantically apologizing and asking what time it is. The man casually tells her it's about 6 o'clock. She lets out a massive sigh of relief, thanking her lucky stars that she hasn't missed curfew yet. Then she tilts her head and asks who the heck he is, leaving the man totally deadpan as he replies he should be asking her that. He quickly realizes this kid has zero clue she's talking to the literal emperor. Looking at his fancy clothes, Ivy innocently asks if he's a professor at the Gifted Academy. He rolls with it, deciding to go undercover, and introduces himself as Professor Cyan Rachin. Ivy beams like a ray of sunshine and happily introduces herself as a brand new student. The emperor stares at her blonde hair and green eyes, flashing back to a tender memory with his late wife. He remembers her touching her red hair and admiring his green eyes. She once happily predicted that their baby would be born with his blonde hair and green eyes. And she imagined their child would grow up to be a beautiful girl. Now, standing right in front of him, is a little girl who fits that exact description perfectly. But he quickly shakes off the thought, calling it completely pointless. After all, he buried his child with his own two hands. The wind blows gently as he snaps back to reality. He looks down at Ivy and points out that an academy student has zero reason to wander all the way into the palace grounds. He narrows his eyes and asks her why she came and if she even knows where she is. Sweating bullets, Ivy awkwardly twiddles her thumbs and confesses she was just drawn in by the flower scent. Looking like a kicked puppy, she asks if she entered a restricted area. The emperor softens slightly, gently brushing a leaf out of her hair. He warns her that wandering around completely alone is never a good idea, especially when she's trespassing inside the royal palace. Ivy frantically nods, promising to carve that rule into her brain forever. But internally, her heart skips a beat, feeling like his gentle touch was almost like a father's. Suddenly, a loud bell starts ringing through the forest, warning that time is up. Professor Cyan asks if she knows her way back or if he needs to escort her. Ivy quickly turns him down, saying she can just retrace her steps. She immediately drops to the ground and starts scurrying through the brush like a tiny raccoon, completely dumbfounding the emperor. Before she disappears, she flashes a bright smile and tells him to remember her name. Watching her crawl away, the emperor sighs, realizing he couldn't even bring himself to get mad at a kid that age. He kneels down by the graves, thinking that if his daughter Ivbian had lived, she would be exactly Ivy's age. But then something on the grass catches his eye. Meanwhile, Ivy makes a mad dash back to the dorms, barely beating the curfew as a staff member scolds her. She pants heavily, just thankful she didn't get absolutely busted on her first day. But when she pats her pockets, she frantically starts searching her bag like a maniac. She realizes she left behind the very first thing she received today, her brand new handkerchief. But then she gets a bright idea, thinking this might be the perfect excuse to see Professor Cyan again. She decides to ask for his office tomorrow and happily pushes open her dorm room door. But the second she walks in, she freezes. The room is packed with intimidating, high-class noble girls. They all stop and stare at her, whispering about how incredibly young Lady Irene's new roommate looks. A snooty girl with dark hair steps up, demanding to know where Ivy is from. When Ivy mentions LM City, the girl immediately clocks her. She maliciously announces to the room that Ivy is the rumored workhouse commoner, judging her messy clothes with utter disgust. Ivy nervously tugs at her clothes, realizing they got slightly wrinkled from her little forest adventure. Suddenly, she spots a stunning white-haired girl and thinks she is easily the prettiest person she's ever seen. The snooty girls swarm the white-haired girl, Lady Irene, whining that her roommate should be high nobility, but Irene coldly tells them to shut up. Irene steps right up to Ivy, staring her down with intense, piercing eyes. Out of nowhere, she bluntly calls Ivy pathetic, making the poor girl freeze in her tracks. Irene brutally criticizes Ivy's skinny frame, her hair, and her skin, calling her an absolute mess. She even questions if the workhouse Ivy came from starved their children. She continues dragging Ivy's appearance, repeating that everything about her is a total disaster. Now, Ivy usually doesn't care what snooty nobles think of her. But when it comes to anyone talking trash about the director who saved her, Ivy absolutely snaps. She yells at the top of her lungs that the director is a kind and wonderful person who would never starve her. The mean girls instantly blow up, screaming at Ivy for daring to raise her voice and calling commoners totally hopeless. They aggressively corner Ivy, demanding she apologize to Lady Irene right this second. But Irene completely ignores the drama, coolly stating that the room is way too stuffy and she wants to go rest. The two fake girls immediately switch up, eagerly agreeing and offering to escort her outside. They lead Irene out, excitedly bragging about the academy's cafeterias while deliberately shoulder-checking Ivy on their way past. The mean girls totally disregard Ivy as they plan a fancy tea time. But before leaving, Irene pauses and shoots one last lingering look back at Ivy. The next morning, the academy clock tower rings bright and early. Ivy finishes getting dressed in her brand new uniform, absolutely glowing because it feels like a total dream. But she checks the clock and realizes it's getting pretty late for breakfast. Peeking out of her room, she notices that Lady Irene still hasn't come out. She stares at the closed door across the hall, wondering if her roommate is just a heavy sleeper. Ivy thinks back to the intense stare Irene gave her yesterday. Despite the harsh words, Ivy gets the feeling that Irene isn't actually a bad person at all. She wonders what that strange, lingering expression really meant. Deciding to be the bigger person, Ivy plans to wake her up and apologize for yelling. She knocks on the door, but when it opens, she's completely caught off guard. The two snooty girls from yesterday are standing there instead, fiercely demanding to know why Ivy is still loitering around. They aggressively ask if she's waiting for Irene, and Ivy nervously admits it. The girls haughtily tell her that Lady Irene is the highest tier of nobility and completely out of her league. They brutally tell Ivy to get lost, claiming they'll take care of Irene themselves. Ivy sighs, realizing Irene already has plenty of friends to hang out with. Feeling a bit bummed out, she turns to head downstairs alone. She hopes she can properly greet her mysterious roommate another time. Meanwhile, the mean girls sneer behind her back, annoyed that the commoner was trying to buddy up with their precious Lady Irene. They gossip about how insulting it is that Irene got stuck with a peasant roommate, totally believing the rumors about randomized dorms. Just then, the door clicks open behind them. Irene steps out and the two girls instantly switch to their fake, cheerful greetings. Irene gives a polite but icy reply as they ask if it was hard getting ready on her first day. One of the girls maliciously suggests that Irene should just use her commoner roommate as a personal servant. But then she laughs, saying Ivy has zero manners anyway, proudly adding that they went ahead and chased her away. Irene's eyes widen and she quietly asks if they really chased her off. The girl cluelessly nods, bragging about scolding Ivy. Irene gets a dark, furious look and mutters that if she hadn't promised her sister, she'd absolutely wreck these two. The snooty girl gets confused, asking what she just said. Irene quickly masks her anger, coldly telling them to hurry downstairs as she walks right past them. The two girls stand there sweating, completely baffled and wondering if they just messed up big time. Outside, the academy staff is busy calling attendance for the first-year students. The instructor happily checks off the names, noting that all the students have gathered. She announces the start of the Grand Palace tour, warning everyone to stick with a buddy so they don't get lost. Outside on the campus, the girls are buzzing with nervous energy. They whisper excitedly among themselves about the boys finally making their appearance. Suddenly, a student points her finger right at our girl. They instantly recognize Ivy from the wild rumors spreading around the academy. Ivy glances around, totally sensing the weird, awkward vibe in the air. A girl named Limora smoothly steps up, flashing a super friendly smile. She introduces herself, and Ivy happily gives her name right back. Limora plays the relatable card, claiming she's also a commoner who totally gets how stressful it is being surrounded by snobby nobles. Ivy is so relieved to make a friend and admits she was nervous about approaching anyone first. They share a quick laugh, acting like instant besties. But then Limora suddenly shifts the tone, asking if she can drop a highly personal question. She leans in and asks if Ivy was actually secretly adopted by a massive noble family. Or better yet, if she's the hidden love child of some elite big shot. Ivy looks completely baffled, but Limora smirks, acting like she already knows the tea. She drops a massive bombshell, asking how Ivy managed to get personally selected by the Emperor himself. Ivy literally blue screens, totally clueless about the Emperor's involvement. She quickly shuts it down, explaining she's never even seen the capital or the Emperor before today. Limora looks skeptical, but before she can push further, the crowd absolutely erupts into fangirl screams. The legendary prodigies Lord Arsel and Lord Luska finally arrive on the scene. The students swarm them like their top-tier idols, leaving Ivy completely mind-blown. Limora acts shocked that Ivy doesn't know their crazy lore. She completely geeks out, revealing that these two are the top candidates to become the Emperor's adopted heir. She hypes up Arsel as an absolute genius who casually gets private audiences with the Emperor. And Luska is a physical powerhouse, practically guaranteed to become a legendary knight. Limora explains that whoever becomes the heir will hold insane power, which is why everyone is desperately trying to suck up to them. She flexes on Ivy, casually bragging that she's already chatted with the boys a few times. But suddenly she panics, realizing the two superstars are heading straight for them. Limora eagerly bows to greet Arsel, but he completely ignores her and stops right in front of Ivy. Limora is totally flabbergasted as Ivy casually says hello back like it's nothing. Arsel actually smiles and compliments Ivy's uniform, completely shocking everyone watching. Ivy just treats him like a normal dude, joking about how Luska ran ahead like an idiot. Arsel promises to catch up with her later and properly greet her. Limora practically vibrates with desperation, silently begging Ivy to introduce her. Ivy plays it cool and introduces her new friend to the elite noble. But Arsel hits Limora with absolute zero interest, flat out saying he's too tired to care. He coldly turns his back and walks away, completely blowing her off. Ivy just assumes he's genuinely exhausted from all the crazy attention. She awkwardly tells Limora that there will be another chance to talk to him. Completely oblivious to the tension, Ivy asks if they should follow the tour guide now. But Limora awkwardly bails, making a quick excuse to go find her other friends. Ivy waves goodbye, having absolutely no idea what just happened. Limora rushes back to the mean girls from the dorms, apologizing for taking so long. They immediately demand the juicy gossip, asking if the Emperor really handpicked the commoner. Limora sweats nervously, admitting Ivy's answer was super vague. The mean girls instantly snap on her, furious because Limora was the one who spread that rumor in the first place. Limora tries to defend herself, insisting that Ivy was definitely hiding something. She reveals the craziest part: Ivy was casually chatting up Lord Arsel right in front of everyone. The girls start connecting the dots, realizing Ivy must have insane backing to pull that off. One of the girls apologizes to Limora for doubting her intel. But internally, Limora is trembling, terrified because she realizes Ivy wasn't lying. She really is just built different. Limora nervously laughs, completely denying that she made up the crazy rumors about Ivy. She tells the snooty mean girls she totally understands why they're suspicious, so she pitches a sneaky plan to get a definite answer. Limora confidently promises to personally corner Ivy and confirm her real identity once and for all. Meanwhile, the Academy tour is in full swing. The guide shows off the magnificent main palace, pointing out the 5 massive buildings connected behind it. The students are absolutely starstruck, completely blown away by the sheer, flex-worthy scale of the royal grounds. But poor little Ivy is struggling in the back, aggressively tiptoeing because she's just way too short to see over the crowd. Suddenly, the students notice some dark scorch marks scattered all over the grand palace walls. The guide calmly explains that those are battle scars left over from the brutal succession war. A student confusedly asks why the royal palace looks so beat up when the regular city streets are already perfectly repaired. The guide smiles, explaining that His Majesty specifically ordered the citizens' damages to be restored first. He literally surrendered the palace's repair budget to fund external facilities to help the people. Hearing this, Ivy's eyes widen as she remembers her rough days back at the workhouse. She recalls the director coming home with a huge smile and a massive box of fresh food, surviving off a sudden budget increase from the emperor. As the group moves to the next location, Ivy realizes just how much the emperor sacrificed for his people. Workhouses are usually dead last on the priority list for government funding. But thanks to the emperor's selfless choice, Ivy and the other orphans actually survived the freezing winter. Suddenly, the gears start turning in her head. She realizes the kind Professor Cyan she met in the forest might actually be the emperor himself. Cut back to the emperor, who is currently stuck in a raging headache of a meeting with his screaming ministers. They are loudly bickering over taxing the rich to protect peasant farmers. The emperor completely shuts them down, coldly roasting the nobles for throwing tantrums instead of setting a proper example. He glares at them, asking if they even know how to have a civilized conversation. Totally fed up, he calls for a strict 10-minute recess and aggressively marches away from the table. Looking out the window to clear his head, he suddenly spots Tiny Ivy waddling along with the academy tour group. He suddenly remembers that today is the official campus tour for the incoming class. Watching Ivy struggle to keep up with the taller kids, he can't help but feel a little protective. He thinks to himself that if she had stumbled into the palace alone, he probably would have kept up his fake professor disguise and personally given her a VIP tour. Suddenly, a nosy minister sneaks up behind him, nervously asking what His Majesty is staring at. The emperor completely panics and smoothly lies, claiming he was just glaring at a bug on the glass. Taking him totally seriously, the panicked minister immediately orders a maid to utterly exterminate all bugs in the palace. Another minister approaches, timidly asking what the emperor is doing standing by the window. The emperor doubles down on his ridiculous lie, leaving the minister absolutely baffled. Completely embarrassed by his uncharacteristic screw-up, the emperor quickly orders everyone back to the table. The ministers awkwardly resume the meeting, carefully suggesting a compromise to implement the new taxes in stages. Still internally cringing over his silly bug excuse, the emperor just wants to wrap the meeting up. So he instantly agrees to their new plan, totally shocking the ministers who expected a brutal debate. Back with the tour group, the guide gathers the students into a massive, luxurious room. She announces that this is the main hall, home to both the emperor's personal office and the continent's largest ballroom. Suddenly, two fully armored knights stride into the hall and greet the tour group. They introduce themselves as palace guards, claiming they were just passing by and got lucky seeing the new students. But one of the knights immediately heads over and pats a student's head, revealing he's actually the kid's uncle. The knight proudly tells his nephew to hit him up if he ever runs into any trouble at the academy. Ivy watches this wholesome interaction, realizing that practically every noble kid here has deep, powerful connections inside the palace. The knights wish the kids good luck with their studies before heading out. A dark-haired noble girl scoffs, muttering that the knights are totally just showing off. But she admits that flexing those royal connections is an absolute power move, secretly wishing she had that kind of backup. Meanwhile, she violently nudges Limora, whispering for her to put her money where her mouth is. Limora plays dumb for a second, acting like she forgot their plan to interrogate Ivy. But the mean girl glares at her, reminding Limora that she promised to confirm if Ivy is actually backed by the emperor. Knowing there are too many witnesses to back out now, Limora nervously agrees and prepares to confront Ivy head-on. Realizing the pressure is actually a perfect opportunity, Limora puts her sneaky plan into motion. She smirks, knowing that no matter what Ivy answers, she's going to look like a total liar in front of the massive crowd. Limora loudly asks Ivy if she's jealous of the boys, casually bringing up the rumor that the emperor personally selected her. The crowd instantly starts whispering, with the other girls mocking Ivy for making up such a ridiculous brag. Ivy panics, her face flushing red as all eyes turn to her. She frantically waves her hands, insisting she never said anything like that, but the guide quickly hushes the noisy group. Suddenly, the palace knight steps in, declaring that they need to address this rumor right now. He sternly scolds Ivy, saying he understands kids get jealous, but using the emperor's name for clout is a massive line to cross. The knight aggressively demands she tell the truth and apologize unless she wants to get expelled, while the mean girls smirk at the drama. But out of nowhere, Lord Arsel steps up, bluntly stating that Ivy is telling the truth, leaving the knight totally caught off guard. The knight freezes, sweating buckets as he realizes he might have just messed up big time. Arsel calmly announces to the whole group that the emperor did personally select Ivy Alden. He absolutely drops the mic, explaining that despite Ivy being the valedictorian just like him, she almost failed solely because of her low social status. Staring the knight down, Arsel reveals his own father got this info straight from the emperor, daring the guard to call that a lie. The knight immediately folds like a cheap lawn chair, sweating profusely as he awkwardly apologizes to Ivy for the misunderstanding. Making a quick excuse, the embarrassed knight literally runs away, leaving the mean girls absolutely shell-shocked that Tiny Ivy is a genius. Limora stands there completely mind-blown, realizing she was actually right about Ivy from the very beginning. But Arcel isn't done. He turns his icy gaze directly toward Limora. He exposes her right on the spot, stating that Ivy never spread the rumor and didn't even know about the Emperor's involvement. He glares at Limora with his piercing blue eyes, demanding to know why she intentionally caused this massive scene. Completely panicking, Limora instantly throws the mean girls under the bus, acting like they were the ones pressuring her. She awkwardly stammers out a fake apology, playing the innocent victim who just made a little mistake. But Arcel is totally unbothered by her weak excuses. He coldly tells her to think a little more before she acts, absolutely wrecking her ego. Arcel turns and walks away, sighing internally that he somehow ended up saving Ivy yet again. Hearing footsteps behind him, he assumes Ivy is coming to thank him for the second time today. But when he turns around, he is totally taken aback by her reaction. Ivy's eyes are sparkling with literal stars, her heart pounding as she realizes the Emperor actually did choose her. She is overwhelmed with joy, practically glowing because she knows she won't be expelled and can stay at the academy. Arcel awkwardly grabs his collar, feeling super flustered by her intensely starry-eyed look. Meanwhile, Limora glares daggers at Ivy, absolutely fuming that she just got totally humiliated while the workhouse kid gets to celebrate. The mean girls nervously ask if Limora is okay after that brutal scolding. They totally gaslight the situation, saying Limora was right anyway so it's all fine, while Limora secretly rolls her eyes at how fake they are. One of the girls whispers, wondering why Lord Arcel actually took Ivy's side, guessing they must be super close. They bitterly complain about how annoying it is that a commoner gets to act so friendly with a top-tier noble. Suddenly, the tour guide calls everyone to gather around for the next stop. She announces that their final destination for the day is the Grand Imperial History Museum. The guide apologizes that it's currently under renovation, so a lot of the exhibits are missing their plaques, but promises they can visit again later. She tells them to feel free to look around and meet at the front plaza soon. Ivy looks at the massive museum, wondering where to even start. The other kids are totally wiped out from the long day, groaning about their feet hurting and finding places to sit down. But Ivy perks up when she overhears some girls talking about a portrait gallery of past Imperial family members. The girls get super excited, hoping to see a portrait of the current emperor. Hearing the emperor's name, Ivy gets absolutely laser-focused. She quietly sneaks away from the resting crowd, totally pumped to go on a little solo mission. She thinks about how the emperor basically saved her life, realizing he's essentially her ultimate benefactor. Bursting with curiosity, she desperately wants to see what his face looks like and walks into the gallery. But her excitement completely flatlines when she sees a massive, totally blank wall. Disappointed but not defeated, she decides to check out the other exhibits instead of just leaving empty-handed. Even without the name plaques, she wanders through the dim halls, quietly admiring the beautiful portraits. Suddenly, she stops in front of a painting of a cute little girl holding a bunny plushie. Ivy smiles, hoping she can learn the name of this pretty princess when the museum is finally finished. Ivy stares up at a stunning portrait of a red-haired woman. She's absolutely captivated, thinking she's the most beautiful person she's ever seen. She completely loses track of time, totally mesmerized by the painting. Suddenly, she snaps back to reality and realizes the museum is dead quiet. Panicking, she rushes over to the massive double doors to catch up with the group. She jiggles the handle, but her heart instantly drops. The door is completely locked from the outside. She's officially trapped. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the white-haired Lady Irene glances around the courtyard. The tour guide announces that it's time to head back to the dorms for dinner. Irene calmly steps up to the guide, pointing out that her tiny roommate is nowhere to be found. The guide asks for a description, and Irene perfectly details Ivy's blonde hair and green eyes. She adds that Ivy is incredibly small and cute, proving she actually pays attention to her new roomie. The guide breaks into a cold sweat, asking where she saw Ivy last. Realizing Ivy might still be stuck inside the main palace, the guide completely freaks out, knowing they can't go back in. The guide sprints straight to the Minister of State to report the missing kid. The minister absolutely loses his mind, yelling at her for being so careless. He interrogates the guide, but she admits Ivy wandered off completely alone. The other girls listen in terror as they realize little Ivy is completely MIA inside the royal grounds. The guide nervously asks if they really have to leave a 7-year-old alone in there until morning. The minister flashes back to the brutal succession war 7 years ago. Because the emperor lost everything in that tragedy, he became insanely strict about security. The minister sweats bullets, explaining that even high-ranking officials can't just roam the palace after hours. He declares their only option is to pray Ivy stays hidden and avoids the Emperor's radar. Because if she gets caught trespassing, she'll face a terrifying punishment. The guide promises to launch a massive search party the second the sun comes up. With no other choice, the rest of the students are escorted back to the dorms, leaving Ivy behind. Back inside, Ivy aggressively bangs her tiny fists against the massive door, screaming for help. But taking a deep breath, she tells herself to stay calm, trusting that the guide will come back for her soon. As the sun sets, the dark shadows make the museum portraits look like creepy ghosts. Spooked out of her mind, she sprints down the hall to escape the creepy vibes. She finally finds a spot bathed in soft moonlight and decides it's safe enough to wait. She slides down the wall, hoping to avoid looking at any more scary paintings. But when she looks up, she realizes she's sitting right under the beautiful red-haired woman's portrait. Comforted by the kind face, she curls up into a tiny ball, trusting someone will find her soon. Completely exhausted from her wild first day, she quickly dozes off. Cut to another part of the palace. Lord Luska turns to his buddy Arsel, casually bringing up the rumors about the missing girl. Arsel looks back from the window, asking for the full scoop. Luska reveals that Ivy got locked inside the palace right before the strict curfew hit. Arsel assumes the staff is already handling it, but Luska shakes his head. He points out that not even the academy staff can bypass the palace lockdown at this hour. Arsel's face drops as he realizes the adults literally abandoned a 7-year-old until morning. Knowing she could be severely traumatized by the dark, creepy palace, Arsel decides to step up. Since both Prodigy boys have VIP palace access permits, he declares they're going on a rescue mission. The two boys sneak into the pitch-black museum, with Luska already shaking in his boots. Luska complains that the palace is way too huge for just the two of them to search. But Arsel stays completely focused, determined to track down the tiny valedictorian. Suddenly, they hear heavy footsteps approaching. A palace guard spots them and demands to know who's there. Luska completely short-circuits, frantically whispering to Arsel for an excuse. But Arsel doesn't even flinch. He steps forward and smoothly drops their elite noble titles like an absolute boss. He confidently flexes their special access permits, while Luska nervously gulps, praying this massive bluff actually works. Arsel instantly freezes in his tracks as a booming voice questions his use of the VIP permits. Stepping out of the shadows is none other than the Emperor himself. The two boys completely stiffen as the Emperor scolds them, asking what a special palace access permit is actually meant for. He sternly reminds them that even top-tier nobles can't just casually break palace rules. He threatens to confiscate their passes if they violate curfew again, prompting the boys to quickly bow and apologize. Seeing them genuinely sweating, the Emperor sighs and lets them off the hook with a warning. He then asks what on earth they're doing sneaking around the palace at night. Arsel drops the truth bomb, explaining that an academy student went missing and they were terrified she'd be trapped alone until morning. He reveals the missing student is Ivy Alden, absolutely stunning the Emperor. The Emperor urgently asks if they have any leads, but Arsel admits they've only searched the tour path so far. The Emperor's mind races, knowing the palace is way too massive for a blind search. To make matters worse, the nighttime security magic is active and most servants have already gone home. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the Emperor makes a split-second decision. He strictly orders the boys back to the dorms, firmly shutting down Arsel's desperate pleas to keep searching. But the Emperor reassures them, declaring he will summon Serafina to track her down. The boys are totally shook, knowing Serafina Lee is an absolute legend and the most powerful magician alive. Not only is she the Academy's headmaster, but she's also the Emperor's closest right-hand confidant. Arsel realizes summoning her means using magic, which is heavily restricted inside the palace. If the Emperor breaks his own hardcore rules, it could severely damage the imperial family's reputation. Arsel is mind-blown that the mighty Emperor is willing to risk massive political backlash just to save one tiny commoner. Cut to the magic stone storage, where Serafina completely loses her mind over the order to cast a massive tracking spell. She nervously asks if a child is missing, and the Emperor grimly confirms it. Since they have zero clues, he orders her to track Ivy's exact location using her magic. Serafina knows the stuck-up ministers are going to throw an absolute fit when they find out the Emperor broke protocol. But as she glances at the stressed Emperor, she wonders if there's a deeper reason behind his panic. Regardless, she gets totally hyped, realizing this is a rare, epic chance to cast a colossal spell inside the palace. She quickly snatches a glowing red magic stone that perfectly matches her energy wavelength. The Emperor hopes she nails it on the first try, knowing the palace's layout heavily interrupts magic flow. Without thinking, Serafina mutters that things would be so much easier if Lilia was here to help. The Emperor's face instantly darkens, fiercely demanding to know what she just said. He aggressively grabs her collar, warning her not to hide anything just because she was close to his late wife. Sweating bullets, Serafina awkwardly explains that Lilia had an incredibly special power. She confesses that whenever Lilia was nearby, the accuracy of Serafina's magic literally skyrocketed. Her spells became way more stable, leaving the Emperor completely baffled as to why he's only hearing this massive secret now. Serafina reveals that Lilia begged her to keep it hidden, terrified because she had been bullied and branded a witch her whole life. Lilia didn't even understand how to control her own insane abilities. Seeing the Emperor utterly devastated by this revelation, Serafina awkwardly suggests they hurry up and find the kid. He releases her and she lets out a massive sigh of relief, thanking her lucky stars she didn't get executed on the spot. Meanwhile, poor little Ivy is curled up in the freezing, dark palace, shivering and starving. But she quickly brushes it off, realizing this is a total walk in the park compared to her horrible past. A tragic flashback shows tiny Ivy getting brutally yelled at by her old, wicked innkeeper. The nasty woman forces a barely walking toddler to do hardcore manual labor, completely ignoring the other adults who tell her to chill out. Crying her eyes out, little Ivy struggles to shovel heavy manure in the pitch-black stables, terrified she'll starve if she fails. When she finally finishes, the wicked innkeeper physically gags at the smell of the exhausted child. She cruelly locks Ivy out of the house, screaming at her to sleep in the freezing barn and scrub herself in the river tomorrow. Leaving Ivy totally abandoned in the cold, she slams the door shut, giving her nothing but a pathetic scrap of food. Snapping back to the present, Ivy reflects on her traumatic childhood. While most people pity kids who grow up in workhouses, for Ivy, the director's orphanage felt like an absolute paradise. She didn't have to break her back doing impossible labor all day long. Best of all, instead of fighting rats for moldy potatoes, she actually received hot, properly cooked meals 3 times a day. Little Ivy sits quietly, thinking her meeting with the director was a massive stroke of luck. Suddenly, a glowing magical trail floats past her and she freezes, wondering if the place is haunted. She follows the light until she stops dead in front of a giant portrait of a beautiful red-haired woman, swearing she just heard a whisper. Meanwhile, the green-haired headmaster channels her magic through a glowing tracking crystal. She pinpoints Ivy's exact location in the Palace History Museum, leading the Emperor and the search party straight to her. Ivy nearly jumps out of her skin when a loud voice suddenly echoes through the hall, calling her name. The heavy doors swing open, revealing the headmaster and her rescue squad. Ivy tries to politely apologize for missing curfew, but the headmaster completely loses her chill, rushing forward and crying over how tiny she is. The energetic woman immediately scoops Ivy up, fussing over her temperature and rambling about their matching magic wavelengths while Ivy just spins in confusion. The other staff members have to awkwardly peel the overly excited headmaster off the poor girl. Ivy stares in pure shock. She can't believe this chaotic woman is the legendary, flawless headmaster she read about in the Academy guidebook. Calming down, the headmaster lifts Ivy again, telling her staff they'll handle the rest of the mess tomorrow. The handsome Emperor watches them leave with a soft smile, noting how strangely fast they managed to find her. He glances up at the painting of the red-haired woman, quietly thanking Lilia's blessing for keeping the girl safe. With the crisis averted, the Emperor turns and silently walks back into the shadows. The headmaster carries the completely exhausted Ivy back to safety. As soon as they walk through the doors, 2 young boys jump up from their seats in pure excitement. They quickly check on Ivy, noticing she looks pretty pale after her little adventure. The headmaster scolds the boys for not going to bed, but the black-haired boy, Arcel, admits they were just too worried to sleep. Ivy's heart warms realizing these two actually cared, and the headmaster gives the boys full credit for the rescue. She completely exposes them for sneaking past curfew into the heavily guarded imperial palace to find her. But before she can spill the beans about the Emperor helping, he angrily shushes her from behind, reminding her it's a top-secret mission. The headmaster panics, sweating bullets as she awkwardly changes the subject and claims she just used her own magic. The boys nervously play along while Ivy politely thanks them for being her knights in shining armor. But then Ivy's face drops and things get serious. Arcel looks her dead in the eye and asks if someone deliberately locked her in that museum. Ivy tenses up, a specific memory flashing in her mind. She remembers a group of older girls giving her dirty looks earlier in the day, but she decides not to point fingers without hard proof. Instead, she forces a smile and lies, claiming she just got too distracted by the cool paintings and lost track of time. Arcel narrows his eyes, clearly not buying her innocent act for a single second. The headmaster steps in to cut the interrogation short, noticing Ivy's hand is swollen and needing some quick first aid. After getting patched up, Ivy happily thanks the headmaster, who points her to the nearby dorms. The little blonde waves goodbye, finally heading off to get some much-needed sleep. But the second the door clicks shut, Arcel drops the nice guy act and asks the headmaster if she actually believed that garbage excuse. The headmaster's face turns totally dark, confirming she knows someone set Ivy up. She vows to hunt down the culprit tomorrow and hand out some seriously brutal discipline. Back in her room, Ivy lets out a huge sigh of relief, ready to crash. But suddenly, she spots a massive plate of perfectly made sandwiches sitting on her table. Her eyes light up like fireworks, instantly assuming the sweet headmaster left her a midnight snack. She happily chows down, promising to thank her properly the next day. The next morning in the dining hall, the red-haired boy groans about being dead tired from their crazy palace heist. Arcel casually roasts him, pointing out he was the one who stayed up gaming all night anyway. Suddenly, Arcel holds up a hand, telling his friend to zip it. At the next table over, the girls from Ivy's flashback are nervously whispering, stressing over whether Ivy is going to snitch on them. The ringleader nearly has a heart attack when a shadow falls over her and a calm voice says hello. It's Arcel holding his breakfast tray with a perfectly innocent smile. The guilty girls instantly start blushing and stuttering, offering Lord Arcel a seat like totally clueless fangirls. Arcel takes a seat, keeps his charming smile plastered on, and casually brings up the massive search party from last night. He drops his voice, subtly warning them that the headmaster is on a warpath, and this whole mystery is about to blow up right in the culprit's face. The nervous girls start sweating bullets, wondering if they'll actually get disciplined by the headmaster. Their panic skyrockets as they realize they could straight up get expelled for their prank. One of them grumbles, annoyed that getting kicked out over a lowly commoner is totally absurd. Arcel puts on his best charming smile and promises to protect them with his prestigious family name if they just spill the tea. His red-haired friend shivers in the background, totally creeped out by Arcel's fake nice guy persona. The girls take the bait hook, line, and sinker. They burst into tears and immediately confess that they locked Ivy in the portrait gallery. But they quickly pass the buck, sobbing that they didn't mean to keep her there and were just tricked by their ringleader, Limora. Wailing like babies, they explain Limora promised to let Ivy out right away and only wanted to scare her. Arcel listens quietly as they admit they got too terrified to speak up when the situation blew out of proportion. He gives them a gentle smile, thanking them for being honest. When they beg him not to snitch, he promises his family name will keep them safe. But the second they look away, his eyes turn icy cold. He silently threatens that if they don't give Ivy a proper apology, he will absolutely ruin them. Walking away, Arcel tells his buddy that his suspicions were dead on. His friend nervously asks what the game plan is now. Arcel's eyes narrow as he declares he's going to give the culprit a taste of her own medicine. Later, the mastermind Limora is quietly sipping her tea in the dining hall. Arcel walks right up to her table, acting totally innocent, and asks if they can talk in private. The other kids start whispering, shocked that these two are interacting since they aren't even close. Limora blushes like crazy and happily agrees to step outside with him. Once they're alone in the hallway, she eagerly asks what he wanted to discuss. Arcel casually lies, saying a staff member found something she lost and offers to personally escort her there. Limora's heart does backflips as he smoothly insists on taking responsibility and guiding her. She happily trails behind him, completely distracted by her massive crush. She asks if he ever loses things, totally missing the dark, plotting look on his face. Suddenly, she feels a creepy chill crawl up her spine. But she completely brushes it off as her imagination when they finally arrive at the door. Arcel politely holds the door open, telling her the staff room is right inside. Limora steps in, but immediately realizes the dark, dusty room doesn't look like a staff office at all. Before she can react, the heavy door slams shut, locking her in. As she nervously taps the wood, Arcel's cold voice echoes from the other side, asking if this situation feels a little familiar. He bluntly tells her that if she doesn't want to rot in there, she better confess to what she did. Limora plays dumb, desperately lying that she had absolutely nothing to do with Ivy going missing. Arcel just shakes his head at her pathetic excuses. Telling her to take care, he turns on his heel and walks away while she screams for him to come back. Limora slides to the floor, realizing he actually abandoned her. Panic sets in as she remembers she's completely alone in a pitch-black, silent room. The darkness closes in around her and her tough girl act completely crumbles. She starts ugly crying, aggressively pounding on the door like a trapped rat. Unable to take it anymore, she screams out a full confession, admitting she ordered the others to lock Ivy up. Suddenly, a second door opens and Ivy steps out, staring at her calmly. Limora wipes her tears, totally confused about where Arcel went. But then it clicks, she realizes this entire setup was a giant trap. She absolutely loses her mind, screaming at Ivy for daring to use Arcel for revenge. Going full classist, Limora calls her an insolent commoner and winds up for a massive slap. But right before she makes contact, someone grabs her wrist with a vice grip. Limora freezes in pure horror as she looks up to see Headmaster Serafina glaring down at her. She stammers, sweating bullets as she tries to claim it's all a big misunderstanding, but the headmaster isn't having it. Limora's soul practically leaves her body as she remembers she just screamed her entire confession at the top of her lungs. Caught red-handed, Limora bursts into tears, finally confessing that her jealousy made her lock Ivy up. She frantically tries to downplay it, claiming she just wanted to tease her and begs Ivy for forgiveness. She pleads like her life depends on it, hoping the tiny blonde will just let her off the hook. But Ivy stares her dead in the eye and flat out drops a savage no. She coldly explains how terrifying it was being trapped in the pitch-black room, and how things could have ended way worse if she hadn't been found. Headmaster Serafina watches closely, realizing that despite the horrific ordeal, Ivy didn't shed a single tear. Most kids would be screaming for their parents, but Ivy held it together like an absolute boss. Ivy points out that Limora knew it was wrong the whole time but still did nothing to help her. With zero hesitation, she completely refuses to forgive the bully. Serafina steps in, declaring it's time to hand out the official punishment. She gives Limora a terrifyingly simple sentence. She has to sincerely apologize to Ivy every single day until she earns her forgiveness. Serafina smiles, asking if that sounds easy enough. Limora totally panics, begging for penalty points or literally any other punishment instead. But the headmaster shuts her down, warning that refusing will only make her discipline 10 times worse. Serafina sighs, deeply disappointed that this kid would rather run away than just own up to her mistake. Meanwhile, Arcel steps out of the shadows, making sure Ivy still wants to stick to her plan. He double-checks if she really wants to keep the bullying a secret from the rest of the school. Ivy nods, her mind completely made up. She decides to handle things quietly, just like her mentor taught her. Later in the dining hall, Ivy realizes she's the center of attention, with everyone gossiping about the massive palace search party from the night before. Feeling the heavy stares burning a hole in her head, she quickly grabs her food to find a hiding spot. A girl walks past, and Ivy flinches, wondering if she's about to get ambushed again. But she realizes the girl is just minding her own business, so Ivy takes a deep breath and approaches her. Desperate to escape the whispering crowd, Ivy politely asks if she can share the table. The girl happily agrees and turns around. Ivy's eyes go wide with surprise. It's Lady Irene, her beautiful, silver-haired roommate. Irene greets her with a soft, elegant smile. She asks if Ivy is okay eating away from her usual friends, admitting she actually really wanted to spend some quality time together. Ivy gets completely flustered, waving her hands and insisting she doesn't mind at all. Irene awkwardly apologizes for coming on too strong, but she quickly admits she's just super excited to finally chat with her. The two settle in and start enjoying their meal together. But on the inside, Irene is completely freaking out, hardcore fangirling over how absurdly adorable Ivy is. Flashing back to enrollment day, the hype around the academy was unreal. Everyone was betting that the elite Lady Irene would get paired with another top-tier noble. Irene checks out her luxurious new dorm room, totally impressed by the royal setup. She admires the gorgeous garden view from the window. But then she spots Ivy's impossibly tiny uniform on the bed and practically goes into cardiac arrest from the cuteness. You see, Irene is from the Southern Empire, where the genetics are built absolutely different. Southerners aren't just a little tall, they are massive absolute units compared to everyone else. So even though Irene is only 10 years old, she looks way older and more mature than her classmates. Because Southern kids grow like weeds, the adults naturally obsess over anything tiny and cute. Irene was the spoiled youngest child of her family, making her even more susceptible to cute things. But she's also fiercely protective, like that time her family freaked out because she sent a noble boy to the hospital. Her dad was totally baffled, demanding to know why she punched the kid in the face and absolutely wrecked him between the legs. Irene casually explains he kicked her first, but her dad wonders why she had to go for the family jewels. Irene's eyes blaze with fury as she reveals the creep pulled up her skirt, so she made sure he'd never even think about doing it again. Hearing this, her dad's confusion instantly turns into pure protective rage. Without hesitating, he calls in Irene's older sister, clearly ready to go to war over this disrespect. Irene and her dad sit together, completely plotting the boy's downfall and planning to absolutely crush him. But her dad quickly gets serious, mentioning that her recent violent streak is making everyone terrified of her. He slides a document across the table, deciding she desperately needs a change of scenery. Irene's eyes bug out as she realizes it's an acceptance letter to the Gifted Academy. Her older sister casually admits she applied for her, making Irene instantly brand her a total traitor. The sister gently explains that Irene really needs to get out there and make some friends. She also points out that making high society connections in the capital is the real goal. Flashing a sneaky smile, she notes that making friends at the academy kills two birds with one stone. She reminds Irene that she's 10 now and needs to start acting like a proper Terrence family member. The Terrence family is insanely wealthy and powerful. That means all their kids are forced to follow heavily calculated paths to maintain their elite status. Her dad adds that going to the academy will finally shut up the crazy rumors about her becoming the crown princess. Irene gets super annoyed, complaining that she only went to one party, there isn't even a crown prince yet, and she'd never take such a suffocating job anyway. But because of all this pressure, she was basically forced into attending the academy against her will. Cutting back to move-in day, Irene is secretly thrilled at the idea of having a tiny, adorable roommate. But her mood tanks when some snobby mean girls show up and start trashing her roommate's belongings as commoner rags. Suddenly, the door swings open and Ivy steps in looking like an absolute angel. The mean girls are taken aback by how young she looks. When Ivy nervously introduces herself, Irene's brain practically melts, seeing her as a tiny, helpless baby chick. Irene is internally screaming like a massive fangirl while trying desperately to keep her cool on the outside. But then she notices Ivy is super skinny with brittle hair, immediately assuming she's been abused. Without thinking, she blurts out a question, asking if the workhouse she came from starved the children. Ivy instantly flares up, passionately defending her director as a totally kind and wonderful person. The mean girls immediately start barking at Ivy for daring to raise her voice at a noble. But Irene shuts them down instantly, declaring she's the one who was completely out of line. Realizing the room is way too toxic with these snobs around, she fakes feeling stuffy. The girls take the hint and quickly escort themselves out, leaving the roommates in awkward silence. Irene regrets it instantly because Ivy went missing the very next day before she could formally apologize. She spiraled into guilt, convinced she'd totally fumbled her chance at making any friends. Snapping back to the present day in the dining hall, Irene finally calls out to Ivy. She takes a deep breath and says she wants to apologize. She admits she was completely wrong to judge Ivy's workhouse based on nasty rumors. Looking genuinely heartbroken, Irene sincerely asks for forgiveness. Ivy softens up, explaining that most people look at her with pity when they hear where she's from. She admits those looks always made her sad because her director always worked so hard to take care of them. Irene tenses up, terrified she really messed up and that Ivy will never forgive her. But instead, Ivy flashes a huge, radiant smile, thanking Irene for being the first person to actually apologize. Ivy also warmly thanks her for secretly preparing that massive meal for her yesterday. She explains a staff member totally snitched that Irene had rushed to order it the second she was found. Irene blushes hard, admitting she was just terrified something horrible had happened to her. She tries to hide her embarrassment, completely failing to hold back how cute she thinks Ivy is. Ivy looks at her new friend, realizing that under that mature, fairy tale princess exterior is actually a huge softie. The girls share a super sweet moment as the tension finally disappears. Suddenly, Arsel and his red-haired buddy walk up to the table. Seeing the empty chairs, the red-haired kid suggests they crash the table and Arsel agrees. Arsel gives Ivy his usual charming morning greeting. The red-haired boy tries to be friendly, asking Irene to remind him of her name since she's from the famous Terrence family. Irene instantly drops her soft side and goes full Ice Queen, glaring daggers at him. The boy starts sweating, whispering to Arsel that Irene is basically his scary female twin while Ivy just looks confused. Later that night in their dorm, Irene casually shifts the topic to tomorrow's course registration, wondering what classes Ivy will pick. In their dorm room, Ivy tells Irene she's still stressing over which classes to take since they can only pick 6. She asks Irene what she chose, but the silver-haired girl casually drops that her noble family already picked her schedule for her. Ivy breaks a sweat, feeling bad for bringing it up, but Irene quickly reassures her it's fine since she didn't have any strong preferences anyway. Irene gives her a sweet smile, hoping Ivy gets into the classes she really wants. The next day rolls around at the beautiful academy. Ivy sits at her desk, absolutely losing her mind as she pulls her hair over the massive stack of course registration forms. She never expected picking just one class to be this complicated, especially with so many cool options. She debates taking imperial philosophy or ancient languages but quickly snaps back to reality. She realizes that if she only takes fun subjects, she won't be able to get a high-paying job to support the orphanage director later. Pumping her fist, she compromises, 3 classes for fun and 3 classes strictly for securing the bag. With 5 chosen, she looks at the final slot on her list. It's mandatory mathematics, but there's an entire army of professors to choose from. Her brain practically short circuits, so she tosses the paper aside, deciding to deal with it later. Classes wrap up for the day, and the students are reminded to finalize their registrations. Meanwhile, Limora walks into the dining hall, realizing the other kids are completely avoiding her after her failed bullying stunt. Feeling the heavy stares, she decides to just grab a quick bite and escape. But she stops dead in her tracks when she spots Ivy flashing a bright smile. Limora glares, furious that Ivy is living her best life while she's forced to watch her back every single day. She seethes with jealousy, watching Ivy sit at the elite table with Arcel and Irene, bitterly thinking that seat belonged to her. Refusing to cower forever, Limora decides she needs to take action and squash this beef. She starts stalking Ivy from the shadows, creeping around the halls like a total spy. Her master plan is to catch Ivy acting cocky and bragging about her high-status friends to the professors. She figures once she gets dirt on the commoner, she can blackmail her into switching rooms and steal her spot next to Irene. But her scheming gets interrupted when Ivy accidentally bumps into two older noble girls. Limora watches from behind a pillar, expecting Ivy to drop Irene's name, but the bullies just start treating her like garbage. Shockingly, Ivy just stands there and takes the abuse without fighting back. Limora crosses her arms, calling Ivy a total idiot for not flexing her powerful connections. She tries to walk away, telling herself it serves the brat right. But the bullies snatch Ivy's bag, mocking her small size and threatening to dump out her stuff. Ivy nervously asks for it back, but the girls just laugh in her face. They call her an insolent workhouse kid, completely cornering her. They demand she bow her head and learn her place, shouting her name down the hall. Suddenly, Limora steps out from the shadows with a fierce glare, interrupting the whole showdown. She casually mentions that Lady Irene is looking for Ivy, instantly striking fear into the bullies. Limora steps up to them, narrowing her eyes and asking if they were just bullying Irene's personal roommate. The girls absolutely panic, shoving the bag into Ivy's chest and desperately claiming they were just helping her up. They scurry away like terrified mice, leaving Limora and Ivy alone in the hallway. Ivy turns to her former bully and drops a soft, genuine thank you for saving her. Limora immediately turns completely red, whipping her head away and going full tsundere. She defensively yells that she only stepped in because watching Ivy act so stupid was making her sick. Ivy casually explains that compared to the brutal bullying at her old school, this was basically nothing. Limora calls her a massive idiot, realizing Ivy just puts up with it to protect Irene's reputation. Softening up just a bit, she warns Ivy to be more careful, grumbling that if one commoner gets walked on, they all look bad. Watching her walk away, Ivy smiles to herself, relieved that they're finally starting to bury the hatchet. Back in her room, she remembers she still has to finish her course registration. She stares at the massive list of math professors, completely clueless on who to pick. Saying screw it, she just checks the box for the very first professor on the list, assuming they're all solid anyway. She heads to the administration office and happily hands in her final form to the front desk. The staff member warmly wishes her luck and Ivy leaves, totally pumped to start her classes. As she walks down the hall, she overhears two older girls complaining about pulling all-nighters just to pick their courses, making her realize she's not the only one struggling. At the registration office, the staff are busy organizing the students' course forms. Two girls snooping through the piles suddenly gasp, noticing someone actually signed up for Professor Maul's math class. Mauls is basically the final boss of the academy, infamous for his downright evil personality and brutal grading. The girls assume it has to be a total accident. After all, every student knows the horror stories, so whoever signed up is absolutely cooked. The staff lady quickly scolds the girls for being nosy. Finally, the first day of the academy semester officially kicks off. Students are buzzing with excitement, chatting about their schedules as they head out. Ivy is totally hyped, happily marching to her very first class, Professor Maul's math course. Math is her absolute favorite subject, so she goes in completely blind, feeling nothing but good vibes. But after walking for what feels like an eternity, she starts panting, completely exhausted. She checks her map, realizing East Building 23 is located at the absolute edge of the massive campus. She finally spots the building in the distance. But as she gets closer, the vibe completely shifts. It looks nothing like the shiny main campus. The place is covered in cobwebs and gives off major haunted house energy. Shaking off the creeps, she confidently throws the classroom door open, only to find a dusty, abandoned room full of broken desks and exactly 0 students. But then she spots a message scribbled on the chalkboard. Maul's left a brutal ultimatum. Anyone taking his class must solve 500 advanced math problems before the next lecture just to qualify. Ivy sweats bullets, realizing the next class is only 2 days away. But instead of crying, she literally bursts into flames of pure determination. Refusing to fall behind, she completely locks in, swearing to finish every single problem. Fast forward to the next class day, two older girls are casually whining about their homework while walking outside. One of them bumps into someone and rubs her head. She looks up and comes face to face with Professor Malls looking like the Grim Reaper. The girls scream like they just saw a ghost and scramble away in absolute terror. Malls just clicks his tongue in pure annoyance. He grumbles about how these weak-willed brats don't even have basic manners. He's completely sick of students being terrified of him when they don't even have the brainpower to pass his class. He throws open his classroom door, fully expecting it to be empty, wondering which idiot actually registered. But he freezes when Tiny Ivy smiles and happily wishes him a good morning. He glares down at her, recognizing her right away. Getting straight to the point, he sternly asks if she finished his impossible assignment. Ivy nervously fidgets, looking down at the floor. She admits she couldn't finish all 500 problems because there were some formulas she couldn't understand. Mal smirks, feeling totally validated. He bluntly tells her class is over and that she's officially unqualified. He orders her to drop the course immediately and turns his back to walk away. But Ivy panics, chasing after him and desperately begging him to just explain one single problem. Mal scowls, brushing her off and claiming he's way too busy for this nonsense. Ignoring his grumpiness, Ivy shoves her notebook in his face, saying she just needs to learn this one specific formula. Malls pauses, his eyes narrowing as he wonders how she solved the earlier problems if she didn't know this part. He glances at her open notebook and is absolutely floored by her flawlessly clean, textbook-perfect solutions. He literally jumps back in shock, realizing this tiny kid actually demolished his advanced college-level homework. Trying to hide his inner panic, he clears his throat and asks why she couldn't solve the current problem when she clearly nailed the previous ones. He totally loses his cool, yelling that they use the exact same formula. Muttering about how frustrating she is, he aggressively yanks a chair out. He barks at her to sit down so he can expose her careless mistake. He clicks his chalk, scoffing that she fell for his trick question like a complete rookie. But deep down, the strict professor is already hooked, jumping right into a step-by-step breakdown of the formula just for her. Professor Malls steps up to the chalkboard, effortlessly breaking down the complex formula step by step. Ivy's eyes literally sparkle as the math finally clicks in her head. She showers the grumpy professor with praise, making him completely flustered under his tough exterior. He clears his throat, awkwardly admitting she isn't completely clueless, before realizing how late it actually is. Ivy gives him a bright smile, thanking him for his time and apologizing for holding him up. She bows respectfully, totally ready to head out and officially drop the impossible course. But Malls quickly stops her in her tracks. Looking away to hide his soft spot, he casually mentions she doesn't need to drop it and tells her to be ready for real lessons next time. Ivy bursts out of the room, absolutely glowing with excitement. She can't believe the most terrifying teacher on campus actually accepted her as his student. Left alone in the dusty room, Malls instantly regrets his hasty decision. He decides he'll just try to persuade her to drop it again if the workload gets too heavy for her. The very next morning, the classroom practically shines with a blinding, sparkly aura. Ivy greets him with the brightest smile ever, looking ready to conquer the world. Mal's jaw hits the floor as he realizes this tiny kid single-handedly scrubbed the entire abandoned classroom top to bottom. Ivy proudly puffs out her chest, flexing her top-tier cleaning skills. The grumpy professor is internally mind-blown by her absolute dedication. But he strictly forbids her from doing it again, warning her to save her stamina for the actual math. With that settled, they dive straight into a brand new, brain-melting formula. They fall into a perfect rhythm, with Malls lecturing and Ivy soaking up the knowledge like a sponge. The two even share an awkward but wholesome high five after she completely nails a question. As class wraps up, Malls assigns the rest of the monstrous problem set for homework. He watches her happily skip out the door, genuinely moved by her pure sincerity. But more than anything, Malls realizes he struck absolute gold. He aggressively clenches his fists, realizing Ivy is a straight-up, once-in-a-generation genius. She's tearing through 2 weeks of college-level material in a single day, and he knows she could easily surpass him if he trains her right. Suddenly struck with a brilliant idea, he immediately summons Headmaster Serafina. The headmaster walks in looking completely done with him, scolding him for using her first name on campus. She crosses her arms, asking what the grumpy hermit could possibly want now. Meanwhile, in the dining hall, Arcel and his red-haired buddy crash Ivy and Irene's table for lunch. The red-haired boy suddenly freaks out, noticing Ivy intensely scribbling away in her notebook like a madwoman. Irene tells him to keep it down, explaining she's just doing Professor Mal's homework. The boy's brain basically short-circuits hearing that name. He warns Ivy that Malls is infamous for being an absolute nightmare who tanks everyone's grades. Arcel chimes in, adding that taking his class is basically career suicide since he never helps his students network. He seriously suggests Ivy drop the class before it completely ruins her future. But Ivy innocently defends the professor, claiming he's actually super sweet and an amazing teacher. She casually drops the bomb that she's already blasted through 2 chapters of advanced math thanks to him. Arcel is completely shook, realizing Malls is aggressively speedrunning the curriculum with her. A terrifying thought crosses his mind. Did Ivy intentionally pick the hardest professor just to gap everyone else? Sweating bullets, Arcel realizes he completely fumbled by dodging the class based on dumb rumors. Without hesitating, he stares her down and declares he's transferring into Malls' class immediately. His buddy whines about being left alone, but Arcel ruthlessly tells him to figure it out himself. Feeling the intense peer pressure, Irene realizes she might need to jump ship too. She imagines Ivy getting super close with the boys while she's left in the dust, completely third-wheeling. Jealousy completely takes over as she quickly justifies dropping her current professor. Ivy looks up with sparkling eyes, thrilled at the idea of all 4 of them taking the class together. The 3 nobles are now burning with fierce, sweaty competitiveness, practically begging Ivy to lead them to the classroom. Cut back to the East Building, Malls is happily strolling down the hall, deciding to go easy on the homework today so Ivy doesn't burn out. He spots the classroom door cracked open, smiling as he expects to see his one precious student waiting for him. Professor Malls reaches for the door handle, feeling absolutely giddy as he thinks about how happy Ivy will be with the snacks he brought her. But suddenly he stops dead in his tracks, his eye twitching. He aggressively throws the door open, screaming at the top of his lungs, completely convinced some punks are trying to steal his precious student. Inside, Arcel, his red-haired buddy, and Irene are sitting at the desks, flinching as Malls absolutely loses his mind. But the second Ivy smiles and warmly wishes him a good morning, his rage completely melts into a soft, grandfatherly smile. The wholesome moment lasts about 2 seconds before he glares daggers at the other 3, demanding to know who these brats are. Irene nervously steps up, explaining that after visiting the classroom, they realized a massive issue. Arcel and his buddy chime in, complaining that the classroom is practically in another time zone. Mal scoffs, telling them to stop whining and just leave their dorms earlier. But Irene isn't having it. She grabs Ivy by the shoulders, exposing the fact that the poor girl skips breakfast just to make it to class on time. She guilt-trips him hard, pointing out the dark circles forming on Ivy's adorable little face. The boys quickly back her up, mentioning Ivy's bruised knees from running and her ridiculously heavy textbooks. Fully cornered, Malls totally caves, stammering that he was already planning to request a classroom closer to the main building anyway. Irene casually mentions the shorter commute will be great for all of them, totally throwing Malls off guard. She stands her ground, reminding him that they all officially registered for the course. Malls scowls, warning them that he only teaches advanced mathematics and asking if they even have what it takes to keep up. The trio stares back with absolute confidence, ready for the challenge. Finding them completely annoying, Malls sighs and decides to test them. He agrees to let them stay, but only if they can solve a single, ridiculously hard problem first. Stepping up to the podium, he dramatically slams his hand down and gives them a strict 15-minute time limit. He warns that failing this means they have 0 chance in his class. Ivy starts sweating, realizing the problem is way trickier than anything she's learned. The test kicks off and the kids start furiously scribbling away. Just 2 minutes in, Arcel calmly stands up and hands in his paper. Malls reviews it and is actually impressed, noting the flawlessly clean calculations from the Duke's son. Without missing a beat, he gives Arcel a solid pass. 8 minutes drop off the clock, and the pressure in the room is getting insanely heavy. Suddenly, the red-haired kid leaps up, shouting that he figured it out and shoves his paper forward. Malls' jaw practically hits the floor as he stares at the crazy solution. He asks how the kid even thought to use an advanced formula, but the boy just laughs and admits he basically brute-forced it with the only math he actually knew. Malls realizes it was a total lucky guess, but admits that sometimes kids stumble onto genius methods. He passes the kid, who absolutely celebrates his crazy stroke of luck. Meanwhile, Ivy glances at the clock, totally panicking as the final 5 minutes approach. She glances over at Irene, worrying if her silver-haired friend will be able to clutch up and pass. From the outside, Irene looks incredibly calm, cool, and collected under the intense pressure. But on the inside, she is absolutely freaking out. Irene's brain is basically short-circuiting as she completely blanks on how to solve the nightmare problem. Flashing back to the headmaster's office, Serafina scolds Malls for aggressively barging in and using her first name. Annoyed, she asks what the grumpy hermit could possibly want now. Malls seriously asks for more background information on Ivy Alden, making Serafina raise an eyebrow. He drops a massive bombshell, revealing he wants to officially become Ivy's guardian and turn her into his mathematician successor. But Serafina completely shuts him down, saying Ivy already has a guardian. Malls absolutely erupts into flames of pure jealousy, demanding to know who could possibly be greater than him. When Serafina refuses to drop the name for security reasons, Maul screams that he's the greatest mathematician in the Empire and way better than whoever it is. He demands the address to fight the Guardian himself, but Serafina literally shoves him out the door. He whines about being her former teacher, but she completely ignores him and slams the door in his face. Serafina lets out a huge sigh of relief, noting that Guardian identities aren't usually classified. But Ivy's situation is a massive, top-secret exception. Cut to the majestic palace, where the handsome emperor is quietly signing documents before a council meeting. His older servant vaguely asks if any pesky bugs have been bothering him lately, and the emperor nervously brushes it off. Back in the classroom, the massive clock ticks down to just 3 minutes left. Irene is sweating bullets, staring at her blank paper and desperately trying to stay calm so she isn't the only one to fail. Back in her flashback taking the entrance test, Irene raises her hand in absolute panic. She desperately asks the teacher what she's supposed to do when she has literally no idea what the problem is even asking. The teacher coldly reminds her that she already learned all the formulas, so it shouldn't be an issue. Irene whines that she just gets confused about which one to use. The teacher pushes her glasses up and bluntly states that knowing which one to use is exactly what skill means. Sweating bullets, Irene asks if she can just try brute forcing every single formula she knows. The teacher sweat drops, warning her that's an incredibly inefficient strategy. But Irene's eyes blaze with determination. Instead of just sitting there and failing, she decides to throw absolutely everything at the wall to see what sticks. She furiously scribbles down formula after formula, crossing them out one by one as they fail. With only 1 minute remaining, Arsel and Luska stare in shock at her insane writing speed. The clock ticks down to 30 seconds. Irene is basically a blur of motion. Realizing she's down to her very last option, she locks in. Right at the buzzer, she completely nails it, proudly staring at the correct answer. The test is officially over, and everyone, including grumpy Professor Malls, is absolutely stunned. Malls reviews her messy paper, completely baffled. He realizes her brute force method was horribly inefficient, but she only pulled it off because her raw calculation speed is completely inhuman. Giving credit where it's due, Malls keeps his promise and allows her to join the class. But the stress is too much for the old man. He looks like his soul just left his body, violently begging them to never bring another student to him again. Irene completely ignores his suffering and happily suggests they move their class to the main building. The kids cheer in agreement while Malls just stands there totally defeated. Later that day, Arsel glares at his red-haired friend Luska, completely annoyed. He asks why Luska is throwing a tantrum again when he literally just passed the test. Luska is practically ripping his hair out over the absolute mountain of homework Malls assigned on day one. Irene snaps at him to shut up so she can concentrate. Luska instantly claps back, mocking her for struggling when he's clearly better at studying. Suddenly, Arsel drops his pen and smoothly announces that he's already done. Luska and Irene are totally shook. Arsel casually flexes that it was super easy thanks to the professor's great teaching, leaving Luska totally defeated. Right in the middle of the tension, Irene's stomach lets out a massive, embarrassing growl. Arsel quickly smooths over the awkwardness by smoothly suggesting they go grab some food. In the massive dining hall, Irene notices something weird about Ivy's food choices. She points out that Ivy literally only ever eats plain sandwiches and asks if there's a specific reason. Ivy awkwardly rubs her neck, looking a little embarrassed. She shyly admits that she doesn't recognize any of the fancy rich kid foods on the menu, so ordering a sandwich is just the safest bet. Ivy stares at the luxurious buffet spread, her eyes shining like stars as she takes in all the delicious-looking dishes. She tries to play it off, claiming sandwiches are great, but Irene totally understands her struggle now. The boys return with their trays, and Irene asks if they're all planning to just eat the exact same thing. Flashing a sneaky smile, Irene announces she wants to try something totally different. In fact, she gets a brilliant idea and points her finger with an evil little smirk. She suggests they just order literally one of everything on the menu. Ivy completely panics, terrified they'll get massive penalty points for leaving leftover food. But Irene just laughs, assuring her that the two boys will easily act as their personal vacuum cleaners. Arsel and Luska shiver, realizing they just got totally played by the silver-haired mastermind. Moments later, a massive feast is slammed onto their table, looking absolutely legendary. Ivy drools over the insane spread, and Irene warmly asks what she wants to dig into first. Luska immediately recommends a traditional Western dish, while Arcel pushes the herb butter lamb steak. Ivy's eyes dart back and forth, totally overwhelmed by the amazing choices. She happily points to a dish, and Luska groans in the background, realizing Arcel's recommendation won again. Ivy takes a huge bite of the food. She aggressively stuffs her cheeks, eating like she's never seen food before in her life. With tears of joy literally forming in her eyes, she calls it the most delicious thing she's ever tasted. Irene giggles, gently telling her to slow down before she gets sick. She casually mentions that Luska has already demolished 2 entire plates. Luska freezes with a whole sausage halfway in his mouth. He whines that she's picking on him and aggressively points directly at Arcel. He completely exposes the dark-haired boy, screaming that Arcel somehow snuck in 4 entire plates without anyone noticing. Arcel just elegantly wipes his mouth with a napkin and calmly tells Luska it's rude to point at people. The 2 boys stare in absolute awe at the massive tower of empty plates, realizing Irene and Ivy just demolished 8 entire servings. Arcel shakes off the shock and asks Luska if he wants to tag along to lunch with the Viscount's kids tomorrow. But Luska completely brushes him off. Arcel gives him a side-eye, reminding him that he's obviously expected to come. Luska refuses, stubbornly saying he'd rather just eat with Ivy. Arcel gets totally triggered, lecturing him about managing his noble connections, but Luska just wants to stay in his comfort zone. Pushed to the limit, Luska turns the tables and calls Arcel out for acting super weird lately. He points out that Arcel used to be an untouchable ice prince, but now he's suddenly hanging out with completely random people. Arcel gets defensive, but Luska smirks, claiming he knows exactly why Arcel is acting like this. He tells the dark-haired boy to really think about who Ivy actually resembles. Arcel aggressively dodges the question, immediately ordering more dessert and pretending he has no idea what Luska is talking about. Internally, he admits it feels weird hanging out with anyone besides his one childhood friend. But he honestly can't figure out who Ivy is supposed to look like. Flashing back to when they were just 5 years old, little Arcel and Luska wander into a sunlit forest. They stumble upon a stunning woman with long red hair happily picking apples. She turns around with a warm smile, asking if they're the kids she was told about and inviting them to join her. Earlier that day, young Arcel was riding in a fancy carriage toward a massive countryside estate for the crown prince's wedding. His dad, the Duke, tells him it's a great chance to see beautiful scenery and network with the elites. 5-year-old Arcel sits there looking completely exhausted. His dad tells him to suck it up, reminding him that a member of the powerful Kylan family has to endure a little fatigue. The Duke then asks if Arcel is getting along with his rowdy friend Luska. Arcel nods obediently, saying there aren't any issues. His dad praises him, firmly ordering him not to fight with the boy and to keep their friendship strong. He explains they'll be working together for a long time, but Arcel struggles to imagine partnering with such an immature crybaby. Still, he accepts his fate, resolving to just take the lad and babysit him. Changing the subject, Arcel looks out the window and asks his dad a serious question. He brings up the upcoming wedding and the crown prince's mysterious bride. Arcel nervously asks if the wild rumors about her being a literal witch are true. The Duke sighs, absolutely baffled that such ridiculous gossip reached his 5-year-old son. He tells Arcel not to blindly believe everything he hears, right as the carriage finally pulls up to the estate. The Duke hops out, telling Arcel to go take a walk and touch some grass while the adults set up. Arcel obediently steps out, watching his dad immediately dive into business mode. While the adults are distracted, Arcel notices Luska sprinting toward the edge of the property. He calls out to his friend, asking where he's going in such a rush. Luska excitedly claims he's bored and is going to play in the Forbidden Forest. Arcel's brain instantly flashes with danger warnings, remembering all the strict rules about never going into the woods alone. He tries to talk sense into him, but Luska just ignores him and runs ahead. Arcel panics, yelling that it's way too dangerous and he could get lost. But Luska doesn't care. They suddenly bump into the beautiful red-haired woman picking apples. She smiles warmly, introducing herself and holding out her basket. She gently asks the boys if they want to come along with her. Arcel freezes in pure horror, his mind instantly connecting her to the crazy witch rumors. He pictures a wicked sorceress doing evil experiments in a creepy forest hideout, convinced she used dark magic to capture the crown prince. He absolutely panics, thinking she's going to drag them away to use as human test subjects. He frantically grabs Luska, whispering that they need to run away immediately. But the red-haired boy just shakes him off, happily sprinting toward the witch. Arcel watches in total disbelief as his idiot friend risks his life just for some free apples. Frustrated, Arcel crosses his arms and decides to just leave him behind to face the consequences. But as he turns away, guilt starts eating at him. He realizes if he abandons Luska, the boy might actually fall victim to her sorcery. Remembering his dad's strict orders to protect their friendship, Arcel grates his teeth and reluctantly runs back to save him. Running through the dense forest, Arcel mutters about how completely annoying this is. But he steals his resolve, promising to go full hero mode and rescue Luska the second the witch tries anything shady. Suddenly, his foot slips on a treacherous part of the path. He completely loses his balance and tumbles hard down a steep drop. Hitting the ground with a thud, he clutches his bloody knee, terrified that he actually broke his leg. He snaps his head up as Luska calls out his name. Luska and the red-haired woman rush over, looking genuinely concerned. The woman stares at his scraped knee, noting that it looks pretty nasty. Panic absolutely takes over Arcel's brain as he realizes he can't run away with a busted leg. He completely spazzes out, warning her that he's the son of Duke Kylan and screaming at her to stay back. But instead of attacking, she simply kneels down and completely surrounds his injured leg with glowing, warm magic. She smiles softly, telling him to take a look. Arcel is completely shook. The nasty wound has literally vanished without a trace. Staring at his perfectly healed leg, his suspicious mind immediately assumes this is a trap. He glares at her, demanding to know what she wants in return for her magic. He fully expects her to demand some crazy favor from his noble family. The woman just smiles warmly, playfully joking that if he wants to repay her for his family's reputation, he'll have to take it up with her father. Without warning, she lightly flicks his forehead. Arcel blushes furiously as she giggles, calling him an oddball just like his friend. Her expression softens as she gently reminds him that when someone helps you, you should always say thank you first. Snapping back to the present day, Arcel thinks about how incredibly kind Lilia was. After they couldn't see her anymore, he tried his absolute hardest to completely forget about her. And honestly, he thought he was doing a great job moving on, until recently. Back at the dining table, Ivy accidentally drops her fork, looking super flustered. Arcel stares at her, his mind spinning as he realizes he constantly sees Lilia whenever he looks at Ivy. He curses Luska in his head for planting that idea, then quickly offers to grab Ivy a replacement fork. Ivy immediately jumps up, wanting to tag along to the counter. Standing at the utensil station, Arcel hands her a shiny new fork. Ivy looks up at him with sparkling eyes, thanking him for always looking out for her. Then she nervously fidgets and asks a completely genuine question. She asks why he's always so incredibly nice to her. Arcel freezes, his mind immediately flashing back to that exact day in the forest. In the memory, the two boys are safely walking alongside Lilia through a beautiful sunlit field. Arcel finally drops his guard and asks why she's being so kind to them after they rudely called her a witch. Lilia acts shocked, teasingly reminding him that he was the only paranoid one who ended up eating dirt. She bursts into a bright, contagious laugh, totally brushing off his dark suspicions. Arcel pouts, pinching Luska's cheek and admitting he already figured out she isn't actually a witch. Lilia's smile turns gentle as she reaches out her hand. She softly cradles their faces, telling them that someday they will become incredibly important to her own child. She prophesies that they'll spend tons of time together and her child will be happy because of them. With a tender look, she tells the boys that they'll share both sad and happy moments together. She kindly begs them to be good friends to that child when the time comes. Back in the present, Ivy snaps Arcel out of his trance, worried that she asked something weird. She frantically waves her hands, saying he completely doesn't have to answer if it's awkward. But Arcel just smiles warmly at her and drops the simplest, sweetest truth, because we're friends. Suddenly, Luska pops out of nowhere, aggressively demanding to know what they're doing over there. Arcel ignores his whining and calmly leads Ivy back to the table. Luska interrogates them like a jealous detective, absolutely convinced they were sharing top-secret gossip without him. The next morning, Ivy knocks on Irene's door to start the day. But the second she opens the door and says good morning, her eyes go wide with absolute shock at what she sees inside. The white-haired beauty Irene admires her stunning outfit in the mirror while greeting her blonde friend Ivy. Ivy is totally clueless, asking if today is some kind of special holiday since her friend is all dressed up. Irene explains that it's Guardians Day, a massive event where Academy students receive encouraging gifts from their sponsors. She mentions the lobby is about to be flooded with presents, but she has to head out separately. Apparently, her guardian went absolutely overboard, sending something way too grand to fit inside the school. Realizing Ivy had zero clue about the holiday, Irene starts sweating, worrying that her friend might not get anything. She quickly tries to downplay the event, calling it just a flashy excuse for the noble kids to flex on each other. To cheer her up, Irene promises to buy Ivy a delicious treat later, instantly bringing back the blonde girl's bright smile. Checking the time, Irene realizes she needs to bounce. She heads out the door, promising to catch up at dinner while Ivy wishes her a safe trip. Meanwhile, down in the lobby, there is a literal mountain of beautifully wrapped boxes stacked to the ceiling. Ivy is absolutely starstruck, shuffling up to the front to get a better look at the wild display. But some snobby girls immediately start whispering behind her back, mocking her for being a commoner who definitely won't get a gift. Suddenly, the teacher claps her hands to quiet the room. She announces that everyone needs to come up as their names are called to claim their guardians present. First up is Elisha, who proudly struts forward to grab her box. She immediately unwraps a shiny jeweled brooch, eating up the attention from her jealous friends. The teacher keeps calling names, handing out boxes to eager students. The room is buzzing with excitement as the noble kids cheer for their presents. Even though she isn't getting anything, Ivy just smiles, genuinely happy to see everyone else having a good time. Kids are rushing everywhere, completely loaded down with giant stacks of gifts. Ivy listens as the nobles ruthlessly mock another girl for hiding her cheap gift, thinking to herself she'd be thrilled just to receive anything. Deciding she's seen enough, she turns around to head back to class. But then she completely freezes. The teacher calls out Ivy Alden, and the blonde girl excitedly sprints up to the front. The teacher hands her a perfectly wrapped pink box. Ivy stares at it like it's a holy relic, completely mesmerized by how pretty it is. She can't wait to rush back to her room and carefully see what's inside. But before she can leave, a snobby girl steps right into her path. The bully demands she hand over the gift right this second. She boldly claims that something feels completely off. According to her, there is zero chance a workhouse kid would get such a fancy present. Ivy nervously clutches her box as the accusation drops. The rest of the nobles start gossiping, agreeing that it was probably a mix-up since commoners rarely even have guardians. Ivy tries to defend herself, saying her name is clearly written on it, but the bully isn't having it. Out of nowhere, a stunning red-haired noble named Lady Israela steps into the spotlight and tells the bully to back off. Ivy is totally starstruck by the newcomer's intense presence. The crowd immediately starts whispering, wondering why a top-tier noble is defending a commoner. Ivy realizes this girl is super famous around the academy. The bully stammers, pointing out how suspicious it is for Ivy to get a gift with such rare wrapping paper. Israela coldly shuts her down, stating that if Ivy has a guardian, there's absolutely nothing weird about it. But then Israela gives a sharp look. She turns to Ivy with a totally unexpected demand. She tells the commoner to just open the gift right there in front of everyone to settle the debate. Ivy hesitates, wanting to unwrap it in peace and save the pretty wrapping paper. But with the whole room staring her down, she realizes she doesn't have a choice. She slowly starts untying the ribbon, trying her best not to wrinkle the material. Losing her mind from the suspense, the bully yells in frustration and snatches the box right out of Ivy's hands. The mean girl smirks, fully believing she's about to expose Ivy as a total fraud in front of the whole school. She cracks open the lid, loudly bragging that a workhouse kid couldn't possibly get anything good. The bully looks at the wooden box with pure disgust and casually yeets it right back at Ivy. The box hits the floor and a plain, round stone rolls out into the middle of the room. The noble kids immediately burst out laughing, joking that she probably picked up a literal rock from the courtyard. Ivy sits frozen on the floor, her face burning red with humiliation. Lady Israela steps forward, putting on a fake act of pity as she looks down at the poor commoner. But hiding behind her hand, Israela is secretly smirking, absolutely eating up the drama. Suddenly, Ivy snaps out of her daze. The whole room is cackling like a pack of hyenas, completely tearing into her. Playing the saint, Israela softly tells the bullies they went a little too far by throwing it. But before she can finish her fake sympathy, she notices something weird. Ivy clutches the stone to her chest, fiercely declaring that it's still a precious gift from her guardian. Right at that moment, the seemingly useless rock bursts into a blinding, golden light. The entire room completely silences, staring in awe at the glowing orb in Ivy's hands. One of the smartest girls adjusts her glasses, trying to comprehend what she's looking at. She loudly gasps, revealing that the rock is actually a super rare magic stone. These crystals are literally bursting with pure ancient magical power. Because of their absolute rarity, they are treated as top-tier treasures collected by the highest nobles and powerful mages. The crowd immediately flips, whispering that even a tiny sliver is worth more than a diamond ring. Realizing she's holding a literal fortune, Ivy notices the stone is emitting a comforting warmth. Suddenly, the same greedy kids who were just laughing at her start begging to touch it. Just as the crowd swarms Ivy, Lady Israela throws her head back and bursts into a dramatic, villainous laugh. Wiping a fake tear from her eye, she apologizes, claiming the whole situation is just too hilarious. Israela smugly announces that she knew right from the start the stone was a complete fake. She paces around, lecturing the room about how common it is for scammers in the capital to sell glowing rocks to gullible people. Flashing a cold glare, she insists Ivy's guardian just got played. According to her, the stone is just a cheap knockoff coated in a basic light spell. The sheep-like crowd instantly changes tunes again, agreeing that a real magic stone would be way too expensive for a commoner anyway. Ivy just hugs the glowing rock tighter, not caring if it's fake, just wishing the nightmare would end. But then a familiar voice rings out through the hall, cutting through the bullying. It's Irene, and she looks absolutely furious, glaring daggers at the crowd. Israela turns to face her rival, keeping her polite, fake smile plastered on. The tension in the room instantly spikes as the two alpha nobles lock eyes. You see, before Irene arrived, Israela was always the undisputed queen bee of high society. She was used to everyone bowing down and worshipping her at every tea party. But the moment Irene entered the picture, everyone dropped Israela like yesterday's trash. Now Irene casually descends the stairs like a total boss, commanding the room's attention. Israela subtly pushes the other girls aside to make sure she's front and center. She formally welcomes Irene, introducing herself as the host of the event. Wanting to completely flex on the newcomer, Israela announces she prepared a special welcome gift. She casually gestures to the massive pile of presents behind her. With a dismissive swipe, she clears away the low-quality gifts to make room for her grand reveal. Opening a fancy box, she proudly shows off a stunning pair of pink bow shoes. Israela brags that they are a brand new boutique design and one of only 3 pairs in the entire empire. The crowd gasps in awe, absolutely eating up the massive flex. But Irene just stares at them blankly and mentions they look identical to shoes she bought 3 months ago. She smoothly delivers the ultimate burn, stating that this style is already completely outdated down in the south. Israela freezes, her jaw practically hitting the floor as her huge flex completely backfires. The crowd immediately starts whispering again, but this time they're praising Irene for her unbothered, savage attitude. They're completely mesmerized by how she handled the situation without breaking a single sweat. Meanwhile, Israela secretly seethes in pure rage, absolutely despising Irene for stealing her spotlight yet again. Israela tries to play it cool, flashing a fake smile as she claims Irene is completely misunderstanding the situation. Irene isn't having it and demands an explanation. Israela lies through her teeth, claiming she was just trying to settle the crowd because Ivy was acting up. Irene glares, daring her to repeat the part about the magic stone being fake. Israela talks down to her, acting totally patronizing as she says Irene just hasn't been in the capital long enough to know better. She claims the market is flooded with fakes, but Ivy stubbornly kept insisting hers was the real deal. Playing the victim, Israela sighs that she just had to step in as a concerned student, but Irene shuts her down, stating she's the clueless one here. Israela blinks in confusion, and Irene hits her with a brutal reality check, reminding everyone she's from the Terrence family. She proudly announces that her family literally runs the magic stone auctions. Having been trained in business since childhood, Irene swears on her family name that Ivy's stone is 100% authentic. Dropping the mic, Irene ruthlessly tells the completely flabbergasted noble to step aside. She immediately rushes over to check on a trembling Ivy. The crowd instantly turns on Israela, whispering about how she was acting all high and mighty while being completely wrong. Israela is practically steaming from the ears, her pride completely shattered as she wonders how a peasant got a real magic stone. Her cronies nervously try to check on her, terrified of her dark aura. One of the lackeys tries to complain that Irene was totally out of line. She whispers that Irene has been way too soft on that commoner lately. Israela snaps her head around, glaring so hard her crony practically jumps out of her skin. Israela locks her terrifying gaze back onto her rival. Meanwhile, Irene is gently comforting Ivy, her usual icy demeanor completely melting away. Israela watches in stunned silence, realizing she's never seen the perfect noble show actual emotion before. A wicked thought crosses Israela's mind as she realizes the flawless Irene Terrence finally has a glaring weakness. Flashing back to before the academy even opened, it's late at night at the palace. A blonde man steps into a dimly lit office. He apologizes for the late visit, but the older man says they urgently need to discuss a student's guardian. The student in question is none other than Ivy Alden. The blonde man confirms that's the girl he specifically selected during a previous meeting. The older man sighs, admitting he's having a massive headache trying to lock down a sponsor for her. It's not that no one wants her, it's actually the opposite. Since the Majesty personally picked her, the greedy nobles are swarming like vultures. They all want to adopt the workhouse kid just to use her as a political pawn after graduation. Sadly, all the decent sponsors are already booked up, leaving them in a tight spot. But the older man has a clever loophole. they can just use a fictional identity, adopting the name of a former professor who never returned from the war. He reveals the alias Cyan Roche. The blonde man nods, agreeing to take on the fake identity to protect the kid. Back in the present, the blonde man chuckles, realizing he's officially acting as an academy professor now. He smiles to himself, admitting that taking responsibility for Ivy actually feels pretty great. Sitting at his desk, he looks at a literal mountain of gifts he bought for her. He sweat drops, realizing way too late that normal people usually only send one present for Guardian's Day. Still, he hopes his glowing magic stone will warmly light up the life of the girl who spent so long trapped in the dark. Meanwhile, back at the dorms, Irene asks Ivy why she bothered dragging back the torn wrapping paper. Ivy clutches the ribbon with shining eyes, saying she wants to treasure every single piece of her very first gift. Hearing this, Irene absolutely loses her mind, furious that those bullies dared to throw something so precious. Ivy quickly waves her hands to calm her friend down, flashing a huge, genuine smile. She explains that being teased was definitely a bummer. But the sheer joy of knowing someone cared enough to prepare a gift for her completely washed away the sadness. Changing the subject, Ivy asks why Irene came back so early when she said she'd be gone until evening. Irene blushes hard and completely fumbles her words, making up a lame excuse about forgetting her hat. Feeling super guilty for leaving her alone with the bullies, Irene pulls Ivy into a tight, protective hug. Ivy happily nuzzles into her shoulder, saying that just having Irene by her side is all she needs to be happy. She thanks Irene for standing up for her, adding that even if the stone is fake, it's still her most prized possession. Irene gives her a totally confused look and bluntly states, that's a real magic stone. Ivy is completely mind-blown as Irene firmly states her family's motto, they never ever lie about their goods. Irene explains this isn't some cheap market knockoff, though it's likely just a basic light-emitting stone since the high-tier ones are locked in the Imperial Palace. Still sweating bullets, Ivy points out that even basic magic stones are insanely rare. Irene casually estimates its auction value at around 10 million gold, causing Ivy's jaw to absolutely drop to the floor. While Irene smiles, noting how much Ivy's guardian must care, Ivy is having a total internal meltdown, realizing she's casually holding a whole building's worth of money. Suddenly, Irene checks the time and realizes she needs to bounce immediately. As she rushes to the door, she promises to be back before dinner. Ivy is confused, asking if she isn't going to class. Irene stops in her tracks, completely shocked that Ivy didn't know classes were canceled today. She feels super guilty for not telling her earlier that Guardian's Day is practically a school-wide holiday. She tells the blonde girl to just use the afternoon to catch up on all the sleep she missed while studying. Irene tucks her friend into bed, placing the precious gift box right beside her so she can rest up after the crazy morning. Just before leaving, Irene notices something weird on the back of Ivy's hand. Ivy instantly panics and hides it, awkwardly laughing it off as just some dust. Buying the totally suspicious excuse, Irene waves goodbye and closes the door behind her. Left alone in the quiet room, Ivy clutches the glowing stone, relieved her friend didn't notice the truth. She gently rubs the smooth surface of the magic relic, looking absolutely terrified. She curls up into a tight ball, terrified that if anyone sees whatever is on her hand, they'll completely hate her. She squeezes her eyes shut, desperately begging for the mysterious mark to just disappear. Hours later, Ivy snaps awake, totally shocked to see the sun is already setting. She realizes she dangerously slept the entire afternoon while literally cuddling the magic stone. Sighing in relief that she didn't drop it, she reaches over to carefully put it back in its box. But when she opens the lid, she freezes. Sitting right inside is the exact handkerchief she lost by the Imperial Graves on enrollment day. Her eyes widen as she finally connects the dots, realizing who her mysterious guardian actually is. Remembering she met the kind professor around this exact time of day, she immediately sprints out of the dorms. If she hurries before the sun goes down, she might just catch him in the exact same spot. She plans to thank him, but also desperately needs to ask if sending a multi-million gold artifact was a massive typo on his part. Arriving at the shadowy gravesite, she spots a familiar pair of shoes standing by the tombstones. She eagerly calls out for Professor Cyan, pushing her way through the thick brush. The blonde man slowly turns around, looking completely majestic in the evening light. Ivy excitedly announces herself but completely eats dirt, tripping over a root on her way out of the bushes. Cyan instantly drops to one knee, looking super worried as he checks if she hurt herself. Ivy beams, just happy to finally see her guardian again. He notices her scratching her hand and asks if she got injured in the fall. She tries to brush it off as a simple itch, but he insists on taking a closer look. Cyan gently grabs her tiny hand, finding the back of it completely spotless. Letting out a massive sigh of relief, he smiles, glad she's okay. He stares at her softly, clearly moved by her bright energy. Despite her clothes being covered in tiny scratches and tears from the bushes, Ivy is completely unharmed and smiling like pure sunshine. She immediately bows her head, thanking him for both the crazy expensive gift and returning her lost handkerchief. She starts excitedly rambling about how amazing the stone is, explaining its weird glowing magic. But then she nervously twiddles her thumbs, pointing out that magic stones are insanely expensive. She carefully asks if he really meant to give her something so valuable, and he gently pats her head, confirming it's all hers. He tells her not to stress, totally flexing that he just had a 10 million gold artifact casually lying around his house. Ivy happily promises to treasure it, but then her face lights up with another question. She mentions she tried looking for his office earlier, but the admin staff literally had zero clue who he was. Cyan starts sweating bullets, awkwardly lying that he simply isn't teaching any classes this semester. Ivy looks a bit bummed, but then instantly gets right up in his face with a huge, eager smile. She innocently asks where his professor's office is located so she can come visit. Cyan stares at the massive, sprawling academy in the distance, internally panicking because he literally doesn't even work there. The green-haired assistant completely loses her mind when Cyan orders her to set up an official professor's office at the academy. She points out that he didn't even want to be a guardian in the first place, asking why he's going to such extreme lengths just because the kid is looking for him. Snapping her fingers, she claims she has a much better solution. She suggests simply changing Ivy's guardian to someone else entirely. Since they only used a fake alias because there were no good candidates at the time, she says the perfect replacement just popped up. She pitches Professor Malls, a highly respected math genius and Cyan's former mentor, pointing out that this frees Cyan up for his actual state duties. She notes that Malls even postponed his retirement just to teach Ivy's class, making him the perfect fit. But Cyan instantly shuts her down with a cold refusal. He orders her to just prepare the office, leaving her completely stunned. Furious, she reminds him he has a literal mountain of real work to do, but he just kicks her out of the room. She angrily stomps her foot, totally baffled by his stubbornness. But then it suddenly clicks. He genuinely doesn't want to give up his spot as Ivy's guardian. Cut to the beautiful academy bathed in afternoon sunlight. The current professor wraps up the day's lesson with a big announcement. Starting next week, their tiny class of 4 will be moving to a brand new room in the main building. He explains it's a bit smaller than the standard rooms, but perfectly sized for their small group. He even adds that they can use it as a personal lounge between classes, absolutely thrilling the kids. But he quickly ruins the mood, threatening to ban anyone from the upcoming festival if they slack on their homework. With that final warning, he dismisses them for the weekend. Irene immediately collapses onto her desk like a deflated balloon, groaning about having to go home. She begs for a way to stay at the dorms with Ivy, affectionately poking her friend's squishy cheeks. The red-haired boy pops over, excited that this is their first official weekend with permission to leave campus. He explains that all the staff get the day off, and parents are already lining up to pick their kids up for the break. Irene sighs deeply, dreading the trip home because her older brothers use sparring as an excuse to absolutely wreck her. The dark-haired boy mentions he's heading to his nearby estate just to grab some books. He complains he'd rather stay and study, then asks Ivy if she's staying behind. Irene immediately worries that Ivy will be super bored totally alone in the massive academy. Ivy smiles, explaining her old workhouse is way too far away, but she's completely used to being by herself. Trying to hype her up, the red-haired boy suggests she go check out the massive Capitol Festival. Suddenly, Irene and the dark-haired boy violently smack him over the head for being so dense. Irene glares at him, mentally screaming that he needs to learn how to read the room. Deep down, Ivy actually really wants to go see the festival. As she walks through the empty academy halls, she dreams of exploring the city. She remembers the glamorous, bustling streets she only got a tiny glimpse of on enrollment day. Even that split-second view from the carriage window was absolutely breathtaking. But her shoulders slump as she remembers the rules. Students can't leave campus without a guardian. Resigned to a boring weekend, she notices how unnervingly quiet the usually packed hallways are. The silence totally creeps her out, sending a shiver down her spine. She decides to literally book it back to the safety of her room. But just as she rounds a corner, she spots a familiar blonde man casually leaning against a pillar. He flashes a warm smile and Ivy's face lights up in pure shock. Cyan gently pats her head, saying he's been waiting for her. Ivy excitedly tackles him into a massive hug, absolutely thrilled to see him again. Cyan's sweat drops, feeling a huge wave of guilt since he's literally playing a fake professor. Still, he keeps his cool as Ivy looks up and asks what brings him to the academy at this hour. Cyan flashes his signature smooth smile, saying he wanted to show her something. Cut to a massive, gorgeous tower in the academy. He leads her into a completely decked out, pristine new office space overlooking the sunset. Ivy sparkles with amazement, thrilled that Professor Cyan finally got his own official room. She completely geeks out over the massive floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining the walls. She innocently asks if he's read all these difficult books, and Cyan nervously stammers, totally lying through his teeth as he nods yes. Cyan clears his throat, awkwardly playing off the massive library by claiming it's totally normal for a professor to have this many books. But Ivy is super curious, asking why he has texts in so many rare, different languages. She reads off the wild titles, completely impressed by his crazy linguistic range. Meanwhile, a quick flashback shows his poor assistant, Serafina, absolutely sobbing because she had to scramble to build this entire fake office in a single day. Ignorant to his assistant's suffering, Cyan just stands there looking effortlessly majestic. Ivy nervously fidgets, asking if she can come to him for help with her studies later. She shyly admits that even though there are other teachers, she feels like she could work way harder if she learned directly from him. Cyan melts instantly, giving her a warm smile and promising to make time for her whenever she needs it. Ivy's eyes literally turn into giant sparkles. Cyan internally panics, realizing he's completely powerless against her puppy dog face. He tells her the office will usually be empty, so she should just leave a letter on the desk if she needs him. She happily agrees. Suddenly, a massive boom echoes outside the window. They look out to see the night sky lighting up with a gorgeous fireworks display. Cyan flinches, finding the noise super annoying and mentally deciding to ban fireworks across the capital. But when he sees Ivy staring out the window, completely mesmerized by the colors, he changes his tune. He smoothly asks if she wants to go check out the festival in person. Ivy gets flustered and immediately declines, making up a weak excuse about it being too late and not caring anyway. Knowing exactly how to play this, Cyan drops a dramatic sigh, saying it's a real shame because he really wanted to go with her. He plays the guilt trip perfectly, pouting that he'll just have to go be lonely all by himself. Ivy instantly cracks, loudly admitting she actually loves festivals and desperately wants to go if it's with him. Cut to the bustling capital. The two are walking through the festival, with Ivy absolutely drooling over a massive grill of meat skewers. Suddenly, she spots something exciting and tugs on his sleeve. It's a classic balloon dart game, and a kid is currently trying to win a prize. Cyan asks if she wants to try, but Ivy fiercely shakes her head, completely intimidated by the pressure. Cyan watches her gulp nervously, reading her like an open book. She quickly tries to drag him away to look at something else. Cyan realizes she's totally used to suppressing everything she actually wants to do or eat. He gently holds her hand, stopping her in her tracks. Deciding to break her out of her shell, he steps up to the booth and announces he'll play a round. Ivy panics, trying to talk him out of it so he doesn't waste his money on her. But Cyan hits her with a devastatingly charming smirk, telling her not to worry. He claims he just wants to try it for his own fun. The stall owner hands the fake professor 3 darts to shoot his shot. Ivy cheers him on with total faith, completely hyping him up. But Cyan completely bricks the throw, missing the balloons by an embarrassing mile. The stall owner mocks him, and Ivy awkwardly tries to coach the supermage to aim a little more to the right. Cyan narrows his eyes, locking in. He whips the second dart like a deadly assassin. Thwack! It perfectly pops a balloon, scaring the absolute life out of the grumpy stall owner. Cyan rubs his chin, acting like the children's game is incredibly difficult. Then he turns and hands the final dart to Ivy, asking for a little backup. He tells her it's their very last chance and he's totally counting on her to carry the team. Fired up by his trust, Ivy clutches the dart and promises to give it her all. She steps up and throws the dart with all her tiny might. Pop! She nails it, and Cyan proudly congratulates her on the massive win. The stall owner hands over the prize, a cute, squishy bunny doll. Ivy is absolutely hyped, bouncing around like a bunny herself and telling Cyan to take his hard-earned prize. But Cyan plays dumb, claiming that's totally not the prize he was aiming for. He says he wanted the giant bear, so he asks if she can just take this little one off his hands instead. When she hesitates, he shrugs and threatens to just return it to the booth. Hook, line, and sinker, Ivy violently snatches the doll, refusing to let it go while Cyan smirks at his successful master plan. Hugging the toy tight, Ivy tears up with pure joy, realizing she finally has a treasure of her very own to love. Cyan smiles at Ivy, asking if she wants to try something else and inviting her to follow him deeper into the lively festival. Spotting an interesting shop up ahead, Cyan starts pushing his way through the massive crowd. He hurriedly tells people to move so he can snag a good spot, totally forgetting he's dragging a tiny kid behind him. Ivy struggles to keep up as the wall of adults completely swallows her up. She gets bumped and shoved around, barely managing to squeeze her way out of the crushing mob. Catching her breath, she looks around and realizes she is completely alone in a sea of strangers. She calls out for the professor, but her tiny voice is instantly drowned out by the noise. Panic starts to set in as she realizes she got totally separated from her guardian. But instead of crying, she remembers a rule her old workhouse director taught her: if you get lost, freeze and don't move. Not wanting to be in the way of the massive crowd, she finds a quiet corner in an alleyway to wait. Hugging her new bunny doll tight, she patiently stands by, hoping Cyan will find her soon. Suddenly, a large shadow looms over her. A super sketchy-looking dude approaches, asking the little girl why she's all by herself. Ivy freezes, her instincts screaming that this guy is bad news. She tries to stammer out an excuse, but the guy glances around to make sure the coast is clear. He cuts her off, dropping the nice guy act and stating he saw her standing alone this entire time. Without warning, he violently snatches her wrist and tries to drag her away. He flashes an absolutely bone-chilling grin, telling her he knows exactly where unwanted kids belong. Meanwhile, Cyan is frantically sprinting through the streets, screaming Ivy's name. He grabs a random guy's shoulder, acting like an absolute madman while searching the crowd. His heart is pounding out of his chest as he wonders where on earth she could have gone. He tries to force himself to stay calm and think logically. But his mind immediately goes to the absolute extremes, flashing back to his brutal days commanding armies. He realizes he needs to find her right this second before it's too late. Going full overprotective dad mode, he seriously considers mobilizing the entire Imperial Knights Order to completely blockade the capital. He is practically losing his mind, terrified that something awful might happen to her. Suddenly, a random citizen taps his shoulder, asking if he's the guy looking for a lost child. Cyan whips around with murderous eyes, instantly grabbing the poor guy by his collar and demanding answers. The terrified man chokes out that he saw a little blonde girl over by the plaza. Realizing he just practically assaulted a civilian, Cyan lets go and awkwardly apologizes for losing his cool. The man's wife chimes in, suggesting that if she isn't at the plaza, he should check the local lost children's center. She casually adds that kidnappers have been super active lately, completely pouring gasoline on Cyan's anxiety. Without a second thought, Cyan takes off like an absolute rocket, leaving the couple in the dust. The man rubs his neck, noting that the frantic blonde guy was way stronger than he looked. His wife scolds the stranger's lack of manners, but her husband defends him, saying any parent would be losing their mind in that situation. The wife huffs, wondering how her husband even knew the guy was looking for a kid. The man chuckles, stating that Cyan literally had the face of a desperate father whose entire world just collapsed. Cut to Cyan, sweating bullets and sprinting as fast as his legs can carry him. He finally arrives at the Lost Children's Center, a quiet building tucked away from the festival chaos. Inside, another lost girl is sobbing uncontrollably until her mother rushes in to embrace her. Ivy watches the emotional reunion, looking down at her bunny doll with a sad expression. The staff gently reminds the kids that they just have to stay put until their parents arrive. The other girl wails in her mother's arms while Ivy sits perfectly still in the corner. As the other parents slowly arrive to pick up their kids, Ivy watches them leave one by one. She contemplates if she should just walk back to the academy by herself. She easily memorized the route, but for some reason her heart keeps telling her to stay and wait. Deciding she doesn't want to cause any more trouble, she prepares to leave, but suddenly the front door bell violently rings. Cyan bursts into the room, panting heavily as he desperately scans the area. He calls out Ivy's name, looking completely frazzled. A staff member approaches to ask if he's picking up a child, and Cyan immediately demands to know if Ivy is there, praying he isn't too late. The receptionist checks the records and drops a total bomb, casually mentioning that Ivy was already picked up. Cyan's brain practically short-circuits, his face instantly turning pale with horror. He violently slams his hands on the desk, yelling that he is the child's guardian and demanding to know if they even check IDs. Sweating bullets, he frantically wonders who on earth could have snatched her, but suddenly he hears a tiny voice call out his name. He turns around to see Ivy standing there, completely safe and holding her bunny. Cyan instantly drops to his knees and pulls her into a desperate, trembling hug. He breathes a massive sigh of relief, thanking his lucky stars that he didn't lose her. Fast forward a bit, and the festival crowd is murmuring in awe at the wealthy dad completely spoiling his daughter. Cyan is casually carrying a massive mountain of food, while Ivy nervously wonders how things escalated this quickly. A quick flashback reveals the sketchy-looking guy was actually a total sweetheart who brought Ivy to the center, and Cyan sincerely thanks him for his help. The man laughs, mentioning he fed the little girl some snacks earlier because her stomach was aggressively growling. Cyan gives Ivy a hilarious deadpan stare, reminding her she explicitly claimed she wasn't hungry. Blushing furiously, Ivy stammers out that she actually stuffed herself with a bunch of egg buns. Cyan isn't having it. He effortlessly scoops her up, declaring that a few buns are nowhere near enough food. The kind shopkeeper just laughs at the wholesome duo as they head back into the busy festival. Cyan goes on an absolute shopping spree, literally buying every single snack in sight while Ivy mentally calculates how she's going to eat it all. Still, she feels incredibly touched that he's going out of his way to buy everything just for her. Taking a bite of the sweet cotton candy, she melts with happiness as Cyan smiles warmly at her. The sky suddenly gets dark, and Cyan tells her to look up because the final event is starting. Hundreds of glowing sky lanterns float into the air, lighting up the night perfectly. Ivy remembers watching them from her cold workhouse window, always wishing she could finally meet her parents. But looking at the beautiful lights now, she realizes she doesn't even need to make a wish tonight. She rests her head against Cyan's chest, feeling completely at peace. Later, Cyan holds a fast-asleep Ivy while checking out a jewelry stall. The owner notes the little girl looks like an absolute angel. The slick vendor points out that Ivy is missing the super popular hairpin that literally every kid is wearing these days. Seeing a golden opportunity to make some cash, the owner gets literal dollar signs in her eyes and offers to pick one out. She asks for Ivy's eye color and Cyan softly replies that they're green. The owner suggests a matching green ribbon, which Cyan agrees to immediately. But then the vendor smoothly points out that the blue ribbon is actually the biggest bestseller right now. She explains it's because the main character of a trendy fairy tale wears blue, making it a total craze. Cyan glances around and realizes every little girl in the plaza is rocking a blue bow. Not wanting Ivy to be left out of the trend, he tells the owner to add the blue one to his tab. But right as she starts packing them, Cyan suddenly stops her. He pulls the ultimate flex, looking her dead in the eye and telling her to just box up the entire table. The next morning, Ivy wakes up in her dorm bed, completely confused about how she got back from the festival. She spots a massive, beautiful gift box sitting on her desk. Opening it up, she starts carefully counting the sheer variety of high-end hairpins inside. She realizes there are 17 perfectly crafted bows. She blushes, remembering how Cyan carefully tested one in her hair the night before, realizing he totally bought the entire set just for her. Absolutely thrilled, she hops out of bed, determined to write him a thank you letter right this second. But peeking out the window, she spots a carriage rolling up, completely confused since the break isn't over yet. She rushes outside to find Irene and the two boys dropping their luggage in the courtyard. The bags hit the floor with a thud as Irene glares daggers at her classmates. Irene is totally annoyed, demanding to know why the boys are back so early when she planned to have Ivy all to herself. Ivy joyfully tackles Irene into a hug, completely melting the silver-haired girl's frustration. Ivy asks why they all returned a day early. In perfect unison, the trio announces that they came back specifically to take her to the festival today. Irene immediately barks at the boys for stealing her line, sending Ivy into a fit of giggles. Twiddling her thumbs, Ivy awkwardly drops the bomb that she actually already went to the festival yesterday. The trio completely freezes, their jaws hitting the floor as they loudly demand to know exactly who she went with. Meanwhile, deep into the night, the Imperial Knights are locking down the city, ordered to make sure not even a single rat escapes. A knight approaches Commander Cyan, handing him a suspicious document they just found during the raid. Scanning the handwriting, Cyan's eyes narrow as he immediately recognizes the author. The knight confirms they found the exact hideout of the man they've been hunting. He addresses Cyan as Your Majesty, revealing his own name to be Rommel. Cyan orders his subordinate to completely tear the area apart, suspecting their target, Siren, is still lurking nearby. Cyan glares at the letter, dead certain that the villain was literally just using this spot as a base. He crushes the paper in his fist, absolutely livid that Siren somehow slipped right through their fingers. His mind instantly flashes back to the period right before the Succession War, standing in the first prince's office. Cyan ruthlessly calls out Prince Clovis, telling him to drop the fake act of pretending he didn't want the throne. With total confidence, Cyan announces he's fully renouncing his own right to rule and moving to Lillian's estate. He turns his back and walks out, leaving his brother sitting alone at his massive desk. Clovis just glares, bitterly calling the whole situation a truly unfortunate turn of events. Cyan realizes the truth, he was the one who actually deserved the crown more than anyone. But instead, he was practically chased out into the countryside like a dog fleeing in shame. He steps down the stairs, realizing this whole mess happened because he didn't keep his guard up. Clovis's smug, backstabbing face flashes in his mind as the ultimate betrayal sinks in. Cyan's reflection turns dark, realizing how vastly mistaken he was to underestimate his enemies. Clovis had taunted him, saying his overconfidence in making Clovis emperor was exactly why he was unfit to rule. Cyan imagines standing back to back with his traitorous brother, the weight of the empire completely dividing them. The memory ends with a chilling threat that Cyan would deeply regret his naive words. Snapping back to the present, Cyan mentally kicks himself, thinking he should have absolutely ended his brother back then. Because of his mercy, Clovis brainwashed their sibling, started a massive war, and caused the tragic deaths of Lillian and Evie. Cyan stares coldly into the night, knowing a snake-like siren wouldn't just hide quietly without plotting to threaten the Empire again. He orders his men to bag every single piece of evidence to bring back to the Imperial Palace for a massive investigation. Rommel tries to calm the Emperor down, telling him not to stress himself out too much over the escape. The knight tries to look on the bright side, hyping up the fact that they secured a ton of solid clues. He promises that no matter where Siren tries to scurry off to, they'll drag him out of the shadows soon enough. Suddenly, Rommel remembers something important from earlier in the day. He pulls out a magical letter sent by Serafina, offering to just leave it on Cyan's desk for later. But the second Cyan hears it's from Evie, he completely freezes in his tracks. Forget the intense investigation, he snatches the envelope right out of Rommel's hand, demanding to read it instantly. He stares at the cute little bird sticker on the seal, instantly recognizing Ivy's handwriting. He wonders if the little blonde girl actually went out of her way to ask his assistant to deliver it. Opening it up, he reads Ivy's sweet message thanking him for the massive haul of hairpins, bragging that she's having the best dilemma deciding which one to wear. But the letter takes a turn as she shyly asks for a huge favor. She explains that her foreign language exams are next week and she's totally struggling, begging the professor to tutor her. Cyan's cold, murderous expression instantly melts into a soft smile, realizing he needs to speedrun this mission so he can write back. He violently shifts gears, ordering his men to pick up the pace and follow him immediately. A few days pass since the festival, and Ivy narrates that she's been dropping by Cyan's office every single day. She peeks into the empty room, looking a bit bummed that his supposed business trip is dragging on for so long. A quick flashback shows Serafina sweating bullets as she makes up a completely fake excuse about Cyan being out of town. Sighing, Ivy pulls out a massive textbook from her bag, deciding to just make the best of it. She plops onto the sofa, settling in to review her lessons until her next class starts. But there's a specific reason she keeps coming back to the empty office. Every single day, a brand new stuffed animal magically appears on the couch, and she totally freaks out as the collection keeps multiplying. Even though the professor isn't there, these cute little gifts keep spawning out of thin air. She hugs a giant pink bunny, absolutely melting at the thought that he set this up knowing she'd come visit. But today, she spots something completely new sitting on the cushions. It's a gorgeous pink box with a lock and key, and Ivy tilts her head, wondering if it's one of those super trendy secret boxes only the owner can open. Ivy is back in the mysterious office, admiring her shiny new pink box and deciding to leave something special inside. Later, back in class, the teacher wraps up the lesson by reminding everyone to cram for their upcoming exams. Ivy casually glances around, realizing the room has already completely emptied out. Suddenly, a cold voice tells her to stop right there, sending a shiver down her spine. It's the mean girl, Lady Israella, who sharply asks what Ivy is doing lingering around since break is almost over. Ivy tries to be polite, but Israella brutally cuts her off, demanding a straight answer. Ivy stammers nervously, causing the noble girl's eyes to narrow as she instantly senses Ivy is hiding something. Israella's piercing glare zeroes right in on Ivy's bag. But right before things go south, the red-haired boy, Ruska, smoothly swoops in with a book, loudly claiming he found what she was looking for. He whispers to the blonde girl that she looks like she's in a tight spot, promising to bail her out. Ruska turns to Israella with a bright, fake smile, cheerfully apologizing for totally interrupting their chat. Unfazed, Israella coldly states it's fine and threatens to just wait right there until they're done. Ruska plays dumb, asking why she'd stick around for a private conversation. Refusing to back down, Israella bluntly states the chat isn't even important, just trying to intimidate them. Taking the hint, Ruska awkwardly excuses himself and quickly pulls Ivy away. Once they're safe, Ruska violently shivers, whispering about how absolutely terrifying that girl is and wondering how Ivy got tangled up with her. Ivy completely ignores the question, giving him a sweet smile and thanking him for the epic save. Ruska puffs out his chest, telling her to let him know if she ever needs a hero again. But internally, he's totally sweating, remembering all the goofy pranks he's pulled and wondering how he's going to rebuild his cool image. Meanwhile, Cyan is struggling at his desk, sweating over some super complicated foreign grammar to prepare for Ivy's tutoring session. He folds a page to mark an important section while his older assistant stands by, looking a bit nervous. Out of nowhere, the assistant drops an absolute mountain of paperwork right onto Cyan's desk. He politely reminds the professor that these documents have a strict time limit. Cyan's soul practically leaves his body when the assistant drops the bomb that the deadline is literally tomorrow morning. Cyan awkwardly clears his throat, promising to get it all done, while the assistant flashes a totally merciless smile. The clock ticks loudly, signaling it's almost time for Ivy's lesson. Cyan abruptly stands up, announcing he's going for a quick walk to escape the paperwork prison. The assistant just stares at the giant pile, prompting Cyan to defensively snap that he'll finish it later, even though the old man didn't say a word. Walking outside, Cyan sighs, thinking it's completely out of character for him to blow off his imperial duties just to study a foreign language. He realizes he's definitely pulling a brutal all-nighter right after the tutoring session. A heavy book suddenly slips from his grasp, snapping him out of his thoughts. Cyan stops dead in his tracks in the middle of the woods, realizing he forgot something incredibly important. He gazes at two quiet tombstones, wondering how long it's been since he last visited his late wife and daughter. He justifies his absence, thinking about how distracted he's been ever since they discovered the villain Siren's hideout. Guilt washes over him, and he decides he needs to go pay his respects right now. But he hesitates, remembering his promise to tutor Ivy. He argues with himself, thinking that visiting his family's graves should absolutely be his top priority. He tries to convince himself that Ivy would totally understand if he skipped the lesson. After all, they could always just reschedule for another day. But Cyan violently grips his shirt, the painful memory of finding his family too late tearing at his heart. He softly apologizes to his late wife and daughter, asking them to wait just a little bit longer. Without another second of hesitation, he turns around and absolutely sprints back to the academy, refusing to make another child wait for him. Cyan bursts into the office where Ivy happily greets him. He asks if she's been waiting long, but she shakes her head. She proudly gestures to the table, showing off the perfectly organized stack of textbooks she prepared. She even went all out, setting up a warm cup of black tea and a plate of snacks just for him. Cyan is completely caught off guard, a soft smile spreading across his face as he realizes how much she was looking forward to this. He gently pats her head, incredibly thankful that he chose to keep his promise instead of leaving her alone. Ivy beams with excitement, eager to dive right into the lesson. Cyan takes a seat and opens the textbook, ready to tackle the exam material. But Ivy suddenly looks up at him with genuine concern, asking if he's feeling tired. Ivy leans in close, innocently pointing out the huge dark circles and redness under the professor's eyes. Cyan is completely caught off guard, reflecting on how he usually masks his emotions flawlessly to survive as the Emperor. He realizes that until now, literally no one outside his inner circle had noticed his exhaustion. Yet this tiny, 7-year-old kid saw right through his ironclad poker face in a matter of seconds. He flashes a genuine smile, wondering if he naturally drops his guard whenever he's around her. Thinking she crossed a line, Ivy frantically apologizes for being rude. But Cyan gently reassures her, thanking her for actually caring about him. Shaking off the heavy mood, he smoothly transitions back to the lesson. After some intense studying, Cyan calls it a day and tells her it's time to head back to the dorms. Ivy praises him like he's the ultimate genius, absolutely thrilled by how much he helped her. She shyly admits the explanation was just a little bit confusing, though. Cyan takes that personally, internally sweating and deciding he needs to sacrifice even more sleep to level up his teaching skills. He realizes Ivy isn't just a normal kid, she's an absolute sponge, soaking up complex knowledge instantly. He's totally in awe, realizing he needs to seriously step up his game before she outpaces him. Since it's getting dark, Cyan offers to personally escort her back to the dormitories. They arrive just outside the massive, towering dorm building. Cyan stops in the shadows, asking if she can make it the rest of the way on her own since the door is right there. He admits he'd love to walk her all the way, but it's too risky if another student recognizes him. Suddenly, he hears rustling in the bushes and glares into the darkness. Luckily, it's just a cute little bunny. Cyan breathes a sigh of relief, realizing he's way too on edge. The distraction reminds him to hand over a special study guide he prepared just for her. Ivy's eyes literally sparkle as she grabs the perfectly organized grammar notes, promising to study super hard. Cyan bids her goodnight, and Ivy happily thanks her favorite professor. Walking away, she hugs the notebook to her chest, incredibly glad she worked up the courage to ask for his help. She immediately books it toward her room, eager to cram the new material before she forgets it. Meanwhile, Israela steps out from the shadows, glaring absolute daggers at the retreating girl. She grinds her teeth, furious as she realizes her suspicions were right. Ivy's guardian situation is incredibly sketchy. Cut to a dark, tense room. Israela stands before her father, complaining about all the humiliation she suffered because of Ivy. But her father just glares at her, completely unfazed by her whining. He casually puffs on a cigar, his terrifying aura making her violently flinch. He coldly forbids her from even calling him father right now. Crushing his cigar, he absolutely rips into her for making an enemy of the insanely powerful Terrence family after all the effort he put into sending her to the academy. Israela desperately tries to defend herself, screeching that Irene Terrence was the one who sided with a filthy commoner first. Her father just shakes his head, completely disappointed by her lack of political brains. He drops the ultimate punishment, banning her from returning to the family estate. He ruthlessly tells her to stay out of his sight until she actually proves herself useful. Left completely alone in the massive hall, Israela trembles, wondering why she's suddenly being treated like garbage. She remembers all the times people praised her perfect etiquette, treating her like the family's flawless little princess. Tears pool in her eyes as she angrily questions how her father could do this to her. Her sadness instantly twists into pure, venomous rage as she refuses to accept that she was wrong for stepping on a peasant. Suddenly, her older brother swaggers into the room, sarcastically tusking at her pathetic state. He totally roasts her for acting all high and mighty, just to end up beefing with the absolute worst family possible. Israela screams at him to get out if he's just here to mock her. But her brother smirks, adjusting his glasses and claiming he's actually here to help. He drops some juicy intel, mentioning he heard the little commoner got her hands on a magic stone. He points out the massive plot hole, a rock that size is worth 10 million gold, which is completely insane for a workhouse kid to have. Even top-tier nobles struggle to get those, so he asks Israela if she knows who the mysterious guardian actually is. Israela narrows her eyes, digging through her memory to recall the name Ivy used. She confidently states it was a professor named Cyan Roche. Her brother's smug expression instantly vanishes, realizing that name is insanely suspicious. The red-haired girl sits tensely as she reviews some highly suspicious documents. Meanwhile, the glasses-wearing man smirks, instructing her to keep a very close watch on Ivy. The girl double-checks the paperwork, completely baffled by the new information. The investigation claims that a guy named Cyan Roche is actually a frail 70-year-old man. But she remembers spying on Ivy in the woods with a mysterious, broad-shouldered dude built straight like a knight. She recalls how he sneakily slipped Ivy a hidden document. And Ivy looked absolutely thrilled to get her hands on it. Sitting alone in the dark, the red-haired girl starts chuckling to herself. Her smile turns totally wicked as she realizes the ammo she just scored. She vows to use this dirt to get Ivy instantly expelled. Cut to Ivy, who randomly gets a sudden chill down her spine. Shaking off the bad vibes, she wanders up to a creepy, abandoned-looking building on campus. She remembers her secret chat with the red-haired boy Luska. He had practically begged her to meet him in this empty classroom and to keep it completely hidden from their friends. Ivy had gullibly agreed, clueless about his real intentions. Now she walks down the gloomy, cobweb-filled hallway, thinking this must be super important. She pushes open the heavy doors, coughing at the thick layer of dust inside. She peeks into the dim room, wondering if Luska is even there yet. Suddenly, a hand reaches out from the shadows. Luska pops up out of nowhere, screaming and scaring the absolute life out of her. Ivy flops onto the floor like a startled cat, while Luska just laughs at his successful prank. Catching his breath, he finally looks at her seriously. He explains why he dragged her out here all alone. Blushing slightly, he asks her to promise not to laugh at what he's about to say. Ivy nods eagerly, promising to keep a straight face. Luska hesitates, telling her she can totally back out if she wants to. His face turns even redder as he stammers through his request. The tension builds in the quiet, dusty room as he struggles to get the words out. He double-checks one last time that she didn't snitch to the others. Ivy gets impatient and tries to snatch the mysterious paper from his hands. Luska panics, desperately pulling it away and begging for just one more second. Finally, he caves and hands over the sheet, looking super embarrassed. He warns her that this is the last time they can practice before the real exam. It turns out they aren't doing anything wild. Ivy is just tutoring him in magic formulas. Ivy spots his mistake right away and happily corrects his math. Luska smiles, admitting that her simple explanations are a total lifesaver. When Ivy asks why he doesn't just listen to the professor, Luska sighs. He explains that the professor's advanced lectures only make sense to absolute geniuses like Arsel. Ivy completely agrees, remembering how confusing the classes actually are. But then Luska looks away, his expression dropping. He admits he wanted secret tutoring because he didn't want the others to see him sweating over the material. Ivy listens quietly, realizing how much pressure he's putting on himself. Luska rubs his neck, confessing that no matter how hard he grinds, he just can't keep up with Arsel. He stares down at his messy notes, feeling completely defeated by his friend's natural talent. He mentions how even the professors look at Arcel like he's a prized trophy. The inferiority complex hits him hard as he accepts he'll never match up. Suddenly, he snaps out of his gloomy thoughts, realizing he just trauma dumped all over Ivy. Ivy tries to comfort him, but she's totally caught off guard. Luska quickly plays it off with a fake laugh, telling her not to worry about his rant. Changing the subject, he smirks and asks how she even managed to ditch the ridiculously clingy Irene to get here. Ivy casually mentions that Irene has been super busy lately, leaving her all alone. Luska immediately panics, realizing his attempt to change the subject just made her even more depressed. Suddenly, a light bulb goes off in his head, and he asks if she wants to take a quick detour before their next class. He hypes it up as a special reward for her tutoring, promising to show her something absolutely amazing. They trek deep into the woods, though Ivy is pretty skeptical since there isn't even a real path. Just then, a few stray raindrops start falling from the sky. Luska plays it cool, brushing it off as a quick passing shower. He urges her forward, promising they are super close to the surprise. But when they arrive, Luska freezes. The gorgeous, sparkling pond he wanted to show off looks completely gloomy in the rain. Ivy lets out a tiny sneeze, sending Luska into full panic mode as he rushes her under some trees for shelter. The passing shower quickly turns into a massive downpour. The pond is completely wrecked by the storm, totally ruining his grand reveal. Luska beats himself up internally, feeling guilty for dragging Ivy out here just to suffer. He suddenly remembers the professor predicting a shower and curses himself for being so hasty. His inferiority complex flares up again, convinced that the perfect Arcel would never make such a rookie mistake. Defeated, he apologizes to Ivy, promising to head straight back to the dorms once the rain clears. But to his surprise, Ivy's eyes are sparkling. She actually loves the rainy pond, saying it reminds her of playing with her old workhouse friends. Luska is totally stunned by her genuine reaction. She gives him a massive smile, admitting that he's the reason she's laughed the most since coming to the academy. Ivy beams at him, telling him that he's a truly special person. Luska is completely captivated, wondering how anyone can be this pure and wholesome. Her words hit him right in the feels, making him realize she's absolutely right. He finally shakes off his insecurities, realizing that comparing himself to Arcel is totally pointless. Snapping back to reality, his eyes widen at a sudden splash. Ivy playfully kicks water at him, demanding he stop acting so stiff and formal. She threatens to keep splashing him until he drops his stuffy title. Luska awkwardly laughs, splashing back as they completely forget about the rain. The wholesome vibes peak when they spot a giant koi fish jumping out of the water, leaving them both totally hyped. Meanwhile, back at the palace, an older advisor waits outside the emperor's office. He chuckles, noting that it's super rare for His Majesty to actually be late. Nearby officials start gossiping about a wild rumor going around the academy. They whisper about a student receiving a fist-sized magic stone, completely convinced it has to be a fake. They argue that no one on Earth would give away something that insanely valuable. The older advisor immediately shuts them down, commanding them to watch their mouths. He sweats a little, realizing the rumors are spreading way faster than he thought. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echo through the hall. The blonde emperor arrives in full royal drip, cutting the pleasantries and ordering everyone to get to work. The gossiping officials quickly bow and scramble out of the room. The advisor notices the massive mountain of paperwork on the emperor's desk. He sighs, knowing His Majesty is about to pull another brutal all-nighter. The advisor bows to leave but hesitates at the door. The emperor looks up, easily reading the old man's expression. The advisor laughs, admitting he can never hide anything from his boss. He steps back in, his tone turning dead serious. He asks if the emperor is worried about the rumors exposing him as Ivy's secret guardian. The emperor stays perfectly calm, completely understanding the concern. He smoothly brushes it off, confident that his disguise holds up and no one has seen his real face. But the advisor shakes his head, clarifying that he isn't worried about the emperor slipping up. His eyes narrow as he drops the real bombshell. Since Ivy attends the Imperial Academy, it's only a matter of time before she sees a portrait and realizes her secret guardian is literally the emperor of the nation. The advisor warns the emperor that if his true identity leaks, Ivy's peaceful academy life will get completely flipped upside down. He bows his head, asking His Majesty not to take offense at an old man's nagging. With his piece spoken, the advisor excuses himself, leaving the emperor alone with his massive pile of work. Cut back to the academy, where a random student is aggressively offering Ivy her seat. Ivy politely waves her hands, trying to back out since she was about to head out anyway. But the gray-haired girl insists, practically forcing her to sit down before someone else snatches the spot. Her friend whispers in shock, wondering why she just gave up her hard-earned desk. Ivy is super confused, asking why they're suddenly treating her like royalty. The girl flashes a fake sweet smile, acting like it's totally no big deal. But then she leans in and drops her real motive, asking Ivy to put in a good word for her family with Lady Irene. Ivy is completely lost as the girl starts eagerly name-dropping Arsel and Luska too. Having secured her bribe, the girl and her friend absolutely bolt out of the library. Ivy just stands there, totally stunned by the blatant networking attempt. She feels super awkward accepting the seat under these sketchy conditions. Just as she's about to leave, she spots a fancy book sitting right on the desk. She peeks out the door to return it, but the girls have already vanished into thin air. Giving up, Ivy sighs and decides she'll just have to return it to them later. She glances down, suddenly getting curious about the title. It turns out to be a massive textbook covering the entire history of the Harkia imperial family. Intrigued, Ivy figures reading just a few pages won't hurt. She plops down in the stolen seat, cracking open the heavy cover. She flips through the pages, completely mesmerized by how insanely detailed the royal records are. Her eyes light up as she lands on a chapter she actually knows, the legendary Battle of Urkane. The book describes it as one of the most important moments in the entire empire's history. Despite terrible odds, the emperor and a tiny squad of knights managed to absolutely wreck thousands of enemy troops. The secret to their insane victory, a magical crest on the back of their hands exclusive to the imperial bloodline. According to the lore, the glowing mark was left by mysterious beings and grants the user crazy, god-tier powers. Ivy is totally mind-blown, reading about how the crest's magic can literally block flying arrows. The text notes that right now, only the current emperor actually possesses this mark. Ivy stares off into space, wishing she could see something that cool in real life. She looks down at her own plain hand, imagining how epic it would be to have a magical power stain. She quickly snaps out of her daydream, reminding herself to focus on reality. She tells herself to hurry up and finish studying for her upcoming exams. As she turns the page, she hits a section dedicated to the portraits of past rulers. Realizing what's coming next, she excitedly flips the page to see the current emperor. But as she looks at the illustration, she completely freezes. She stares at the detailed drawing of the ruler, her brain short-circuiting. The portrait shows a handsome man with sharp features, sparkling golden hair, and icy blue eyes. Ivy starts sweating bullets. The emperor looks exactly like her beloved Professor Cyan. Her mind spirals as she tries to comprehend how two people could look so insanely identical. But then she hesitates, trying to convince herself that the vibes are totally off. She remembers how Professor Cyan is super gentle and always gives her the warmest smiles. Meanwhile, the guy in the emperor's portrait looks ice cold and honestly pretty scary. Looking closer, she feels like the emperor's eyes just look sad and lonely. Still, the physical resemblance is way too perfect to ignore. Could her sweet teacher actually be the ruler of the nation? Panic sets in, and Ivy literally slaps her cheeks to stop the wild overthinking. She starts rationalizing, remembering that Headmaster Serafina is super tight with Professor Cyan and even acts as his mailman. She naively decides there's no way a respected adult like the headmaster would cover up a lie that massive. Plus, Professor Cyan spent all that time hanging out with her at the festival. The Emperor would be way too busy running a country for that. Closing the book with a confident thud, Ivy completely dismisses the truth, cementing the idea that the professor is just a professor. Ivy shakes off her wild theories, realizing she seriously needs to hit the books for her exams. But right on cue, the librarian claps her hands for a major announcement. She cheerfully tells everyone that the library will be closing at sunset today. Ivy completely freezes, the color instantly draining from her face. Panic hits her like a truck because she hasn't studied a single page yet. Nearby, some girls are gossiping about a secret confession, but Ivy totally tunes them out. She speedwalks past a group of arguing students, completely laser-focused. She vows to block out all distractions until her exams are finally over. Stepping outside, she marches toward her dorm, knowing everyone else is probably grinding hard right now. But suddenly, something catches her eye and stops her dead in her tracks. There's a bright light shining straight from Professor Cyan's office. Realizing he might still be on campus, her face lights up with excitement. A raindrop hits her head as a sudden shower begins to fall. Not wanting to miss him, Ivy absolutely bolts toward the office building. Meanwhile, over in the cafeteria, Irene is practically pulling her hair out, furiously grinding through her study guides. She's super stressed because the upcoming exams determine their class placements. If she slips up even a little bit, she could get separated from her precious Ivy. She admits that studying around Ivy is literally impossible because she just wants to pinch her cute cheeks and chat all night. Irene slaps her own face to lock in, vowing to make up for lost playtime once exams are over. Suddenly, Arcel pops up from the next table, dryly asking how long he's been watching her violently slap herself. Irene turns bright red, yelling at him for not saying something sooner. Other students start whispering, totally shocked to see the two top students actually hanging out. Arcel ignores the crowd, flashing a polite smile at Lady Irene. Irene glares right back, sarcastically asking what Lord Arcel wants. Arcel casually mentions he's just studying, but quickly asks why she isn't glued to Ivy's side like usual. Irene sighs, explaining that she has zero self-control when Ivy is around. Arcel looks genuinely confused, asking why she doesn't just play first and study later. Irene instantly gets ticked off, snapping that normal people can't just breeze through exams like a genius can. Arcel takes her insult completely seriously, literally pondering if he should just hit her. Instead, he smoothly tells her not to worry, claiming he'll personally take good care of Ivy if they get separated. Irene practically breathes fire, absolutely refusing to let that happen. Frustrated by his genius energy, Irene slams her book shut, claiming she can't concentrate here anymore. Arcel just stares blankly as she aggressively packs up to head back to the dorm. But outside the cafeteria, students are suddenly running around in a total panic. Arcel turns around just as a frantic red-haired boy bursts into the room. It's Luska, completely out of breath and sweating bullets. Arcel immediately grabs him, demanding to know what's going on. Luska looks absolutely terrified, screaming that something bad just happened to Ivy. Cut back to Ivy, who is happily skipping up the path to the professor's office. She pumps herself up, planning to flex all the vocabulary words she memorized. Bursting through the heavy double doors, she excitedly calls out Professor Cyan's name. But the person waiting inside flashes a totally wicked smirk. It's the red-haired mean girl, and she looks like a villain who just trapped her prey. She casually mentions she saw Ivy sneaking into this remote building and decided to snoop around. Smug as ever, she taps a highly suspicious box sitting right on the desk. Her eyes narrow as she corners Ivy in the empty room. She viciously accuses Ivy of playing the pitiful commoner card while secretly hoarding a massive pile of luxury gifts. The mean girl pulls out the ultimate wild card, accusing Ivy of securing stolen exam answers. Ivy stammers, completely blindsided, but the mean girl just steps closer, ready to absolutely wreck her reputation. The red-haired mean girl demands Ivy open the box and show everyone what she's hiding inside. Ivy hesitates, holding it tightly to her chest. Israela smirks, claiming she knew this would happen. Her smile drops as she viciously threatens to just break it open and find out herself. She lunges forward, but Ivy desperately shields the box, screaming for her to stop. Another student rushes in, playing the victim, while Ivy falls to the floor clutching her precious item. Israela puts on a totally fake act, gasping about how a lowly commoner dared to disrespect her and demanding a full apology. Meanwhile, back at the royal cemetery, the emperor silently wipes down a gravestone, reflecting on his advisor's warning. He realizes that giving Ivy special attention could literally ruin her life by dragging her into toxic noble politics. His expression darkens, admitting that he was way too selfish. Driven by the grief of losing his own daughter, he tried to pour all his fatherly love into Ivy without realizing the massive target it put on her back. He decides to step away, comforting himself with the fact that Ivy has great friends and mentors to look after her now. He plans to have the headmaster tell Ivy that Professor Cyan has to leave on an urgent faraway trip. He knows a sudden goodbye will hit the poor kid hard. But he hopes that as she meets new people, the pain of his absence will quickly fade. Finishing his task, he stands up, the graves now completely spotless. He kneels one last time, apologizing to his late family for neglecting their resting place. Suddenly, he blinks, realizing his feet unconsciously carried him right back toward the academy. He stares up at the brightly lit building, wondering if Ivy is inside studying right now. His resolve crumbles just a bit, thinking maybe a proper, in-person goodbye is the right move. He heads toward his office, which is just a short walk away. He completely understands that breaking the news to Ivy will crush her. He pictures her bright, happy face, making the impending goodbye hurt even more. But his thoughts are instantly shattered when Arcel suddenly calls out to him. Arcel looks totally frantic, begging the professor to come quickly. He points back toward the buildings, explaining that a massive fight just broke out and things are getting wild. The Emperor's eyes narrow as he recognizes the exact direction. A huge crowd of students is swarming right outside his personal office doors. Arcel is super confused about how a brawl started in such a remote spot, but they rush inside without wasting a second. Inside, it is absolute chaos. Luska is using all his strength to hold back a completely feral Irene as she screams at Israela. The Emperor watches from the doorway, realizing he needs to call backup to defuse the situation. Irene is absolutely seeing red, shouting at the mean girls and asking if they've completely lost their minds. Luska sweats bullets, desperately trying to keep Irene from turning the room into a war zone. Flashback to 10 minutes ago, right as the drama peaked. Irene savagely shoves her way through the murmuring crowd to get to the front. Her jaw drops as she sees two lackeys cornering Ivy on the floor, aggressively demanding she hand over the box. Irene totally snaps. Without hesitating, she grabs one of the bullies by the hair and yanks her backward like a ragdoll. Luska barely manages to catch Irene, wrapping his arms around her and screaming for her to chill out. Arcel rushes to Ivy's side to protect her while Irene furiously vows to teach those brats a brutal lesson. Even the usually calm Luska is barking mad, demanding to know how three older girls could jump a literal 7-year-old. Irene glares daggers, warning them that they won't get away with this garbage. But Israela just smirks, coldly stating that school rules only apply to students who actually get to stay. She claims Ivy is about to get expelled and thrown right back into the orphanage where she belongs. Irene and Luska warn her to shut up, but Israela doesn't back down. She loudly declares to the whole room that Ivy is a dirty cheater who secretly received the exam answers from a professor. She points straight at the box Ivy is hugging, claiming the stolen test is stashed right inside. The crowd starts whispering, and even Irene looks slightly caught off guard by the massive accusation. Shrugging off Luska's grip, Irene immediately steps toward her friend. She drops to her knees next to the trembling Ivy, gently promising that she totally believes her innocence. To clear the air and shut the haters down, Irene softly asks Ivy to just open the box and prove them wrong. But to everyone's shock, Ivy frantically shakes her head, absolutely refusing to reveal what's inside. Irene stares at the doorway, completely stunned by who just walked in. She whispers the professor's name, her eyes wide with shock. The Emperor strides into the room, his presence instantly shifting the vibe. He locks eyes on the chaotic scene, looking absolutely furious. Irene nervously glances back at Arcel and Luska, wondering if she's the only one sensing this crazy, intense aura. The two boys are sweating bullets, completely baffled by their usually gentle teacher's new energy. Ignoring the crowd, the Emperor kneels down and gently wipes Ivy's tears away. He barks an order at the boys to grab something damp to clean her up. But Israela is fuming, absolutely livid that a mere professor is barking orders at high-ranking nobles. She angrily bites her thumb, refusing to let her master plan get derailed by some random teacher. She snaps, pointing at Ivy and accusing her of faking a pitiful act to manipulate her way into special privileges. Israela turns her wrath on the professor, yelling at him for staying so calm when he supposedly supplied the cheat sheet. She boldly calls him a con artist who took bribes from a commoner. Ivy steps up, fiercely defending her favorite teacher. The Emperor remains stone cold, casually brushing off the mean girl's insults. But Ivy starts trembling, crying that she doesn't want the professor's life ruined just because of her. Clutching the mysterious box, she finally caves. With tears streaming down her face, she agrees to open it up for everyone to see. But when the lid pops open, the crowd starts whispering, because the box is literally just filled with leftover snacks and random scraps. Israela's jaw drops to the floor, absolutely refusing to believe she was wrong. She completely loses it, dropping to her knees and tearing through the trash like a rabid raccoon looking for the cheat sheet. The Emperor calmly shields Ivy as the mean girl throws a massive tantrum on the floor. Realizing her grand exposure is a total flop, Israela starts sweating profusely. But she refuses to take the L, suddenly pointing at the Emperor and calling him a total fraud. She smugly reveals that her brother did a full background check on the professor. She drops the bombshell that the real Cyan Rosen is actually a frail, elderly geology major stuck in the countryside. Stepping up to him, she demands to know who this imposter really is. Ivy looks up at her guardian, visibly worried by the wild accusations. But the Emperor doesn't even flinch, smoothly admitting that she's totally right, he isn't Cyan Rosen. Israela grins like a maniac, convinced she just secured the ultimate victory. The whole room erupts into confused murmurs as the students process the confession. Ignoring the drama, the Emperor scoops Ivy into his arms and orders the crowd to clear a path. Suddenly, Headmaster Serafina bursts into the room, threatening everyone with instant penalty points if they don't head to their dorms. Israela's face lights up, thinking backup has finally arrived. She excitedly tells the headmaster that she just busted a massive scam right in the middle of campus. She points an accusing finger at the Emperor, exposing him as a fake teacher who snuck in. She demands that Serafina investigate him immediately for trespassing. But Serafina goes completely pale, staring at the man and whispering his true title in sheer terror, the Emperor. Israela freezes, her brain totally short-circuiting as the reality of who she just yelled at finally sinks in. She stammers, trying to compute why the literal ruler of the empire would be protecting a nobody. The Emperor slowly turns around, fixing her with a death glare as he asks why she's calling Ivy lowly. Terrified, Israela stutters that it's because Ivy is just a workhouse orphan. She frantically points at the spilled box, accusing Ivy of being a trash-picking thief. But the Emperor instantly shuts her down, firmly stating that Ivy didn't steal a single thing. Holding back tears, Ivy quietly explains she only collected discarded scraps because her old orphanage was always desperate for supplies. The Emperor gently pulls her into a hug, completely heartbroken by her confession. He finally realizes Ivy hid the box to protect her own pride, not wanting the snobby rich kids to know she hoarded garbage. On top of that, she was saving up these literal scraps to send back home as gifts. Headmaster Serafina carefully approaches, sweating bullets as she asks His Majesty to explain the situation. The Emperor just shoots her a look so cold it could freeze fire, making it very clear that heads are about to roll. The Emperor looks down at Ivy, quietly wondering if he messed up by hiding his identity. But Headmaster Serafina steps up, declaring she has zero intention of keeping the secret anymore. She breaks out into a cold sweat, realizing the massive truth she just leaked to the room. Arcel and the other kids exchange panicked glances, realizing His Majesty's true identity is totally exposed. Serafina gulps, knowing there's absolutely no turning back now. She immediately drops to one knee, offering her utmost respect to the ruler of the empire. Seeing the headmaster bow, Arcel and the rest of the students scramble to hit the floor. In seconds, the entire room is kneeling in dead silence before the Emperor. Israela falls to the ground, her brain completely short-circuiting as she denies reality. She trembles in pure terror, unable to process why the literal Emperor is standing right in front of her. The Emperor ignores her and coldly asks the headmaster what the punishment is for assaulting a fellow student. Serafina states that a stunt like this guarantees instant expulsion. Israela's heart drops into her stomach. Her lackeys freeze like deer in headlights, realizing their lives at the academy are over. The Emperor glares, adding that they used violence on someone much younger. Serafina confirms they'll be permanently blacklisted from all higher academies. To twist the knife, the Emperor asks if Israela's nosy older brother will be punished too. Serafina nods, and the Emperor orders her to launch a full investigation. Israela realizes she is completely cooked. The sheer panic sets in as she realizes she just destroyed her brother's entire future. She grips her skirt, imagining the absolute nightmare awaiting her at home. The thought of her terrifying father finding out makes her blood run cold. Desperate, she scrambles forward, screaming that Ivy pushed her first. She bursts into crocodile tears, begging the Emperor for mercy and promising to apologize. But the Emperor doesn't even look at her, simply covering Ivy's ears as he walks right past the pathetic display. Later that night, the Emperor stands outside the palace infirmary. An older doctor nervously begs His Majesty to go wait in his office. But the Emperor refuses to budge, demanding to stay right outside the doors. The moment the doctor steps out, the Emperor practically jumps him, frantically asking if Ivy is okay. The doctor assures him nothing is broken, but mentions the bruising will last for days. The Emperor immediately loses his mind, grabbing the poor doctor by the collar and yelling about potential scars. Sweating bullets, the doctor promises the swelling will vanish in a week. He admits the bullies really did a number on her, but thankfully they treated it fast. The Emperor sighs, letting go and apologizing, but then the doctor mentions one small issue. The Emperor instantly grabs him by the collar again, ready to absolutely ragdoll the old man. The doctor quickly stammers that Ivy might just be mentally in shock. Hearing this, the Emperor decides he needs to see her condition with his own eyes. The doctor desperately tries to hold him back, pleading for him to listen. He explains that it's completely normal for her to be traumatized and shaking in fear right now. Steeling himself, the Emperor pushes open the door, expecting the worst. Inside, Ivy peeks at him, looking more nervous than terrified. The Emperor freezes, unsure of how to approach her. Suddenly, Ivy dives off the bed and hits a perfect flat-on-the-floor bow. She peeks up, sweating as she wonders if this is the correct way to greet royalty. She accidentally bonks her head on the floor, looking completely ridiculous. The Emperor is dumbfounded, asking who told her to do that while Ivy stammers about not learning proper manners yet. He sighs, gently lifting her back onto the bed and telling her to drop the stiff formalities. He asks if sitting up hurts, but Ivy instantly snaps to attention, shouting "No, Your Majesty," like a tiny soldier. She fidgets with her hands, clearly dying to ask him something. Finally, she looks up and asks if he is truly the Emperor. He gives her a warm smile and drops his full royal name, leaving Ivy absolutely flabbergasted. Ivy mentally spirals, realizing she's been treating the most powerful man in the world like a regular dude. She panics, remembering she literally dragged him to festivals and fell asleep in his arms, convinced she's definitely getting her head chopped off. The Emperor interrupts her internal freakout, gently asking if he can ask her a question. He asks why she didn't just request new supplies from the academy instead of hoarding literal trash. Ivy nervously explains that she was just following the strict school rules. She points out that academy supplies can't be taken off campus or used for personal reasons, so sending them to her friends was a no-go. The Emperor is stunned. He knows absolutely nobody actually follows that rule. But Ivy swallowed her pride and picked through the garbage just to stay out of trouble. He's deeply moved, realizing she did the right thing even when no one was watching. He thinks about how even top-tier geniuses like Arcel would have found a loophole, but Ivy's raw integrity is exactly what he wants in an heir. He sighs, knowing the snobby ministers would throw a massive fit over her commoner status if he tried to make her a candidate. Ivy nervously stammers, trying to formally address him as Your Majesty. But he immediately shuts it down, telling her to just keep calling him Professor. He explains he'll keep teaching her class this semester and wants things to stay exactly the same. He even takes it a step further, telling her she can just call him by his first name. This is an absolutely wild flex, considering calling the Emperor by his real name is borderline treason for most people. It's a hyper-exclusive privilege reserved for a tiny handful of elite nobles. Even his closest dukes and marquises barely have permission to do it. And yet, he's just handing out this massive honor to an ordinary orphan. Ivy blushes and nervously tests out his real name, Cloys. He smiles, gently patting her head and saying it sounds way better than his stiff royal title. Changing the subject, he asks if she's absolutely sure she isn't hurt anywhere else. Ivy laughs it off, claiming she's totally used to getting injuries like this. The Emperor's dad instincts instantly kick in. He remembers she only had happy memories at the workhouse. He realizes someone must have abused her before that and silently vows to dig into her dark past. Suddenly, the royal doctor walks into the room. He hands over a special medicine designed to drop Ivy's swelling fast. The Emperor warns her it might taste terrible as he hands her the cup. Ivy bravely chugs the entire thing down in one go. But she instantly regrets it, shuddering as the awful bitterness completely wrecks her taste buds. The doctor chuckles, pulling out a piece of candy he brought just for this. Without missing a beat, the Emperor completely snatches the candy right out of the old man's hand. He feeds it to Ivy himself, making sure his favorite student gets the sweet relief. Ivy's face lights up, completely forgetting the nasty medicine. The doctor watches them, absolutely mind-blown by the Emperor's genuine smile. Just a few months ago, the Emperor's depression was so bad it was terrifying the entire staff. The doctor seriously feared he was going to do something drastic. But seeing him glowing with happiness right now feels like a literal miracle. He realizes the rumors about His Majesty softening up were all true. And it's all thanks to this one tiny, wholesome orphan. A knock at the door breaks the vibe as the head chamberlain steps in. She reminds them that curfew is approaching and offers to escort Ivy back to her dorm. The Emperor looks super bummed, wishing Ivy could just crash there for the night. But Ivy nervously admits the palace is way too huge for her to sleep comfortably. He wishes he could walk her back himself, but knows his blown cover makes it way too risky. He accepts defeat and officially hands the escort duty over to the chamberlain. But then he casually drops an insane order, telling her to deploy Rommel and his entire squad of knights for the trip. The chamberlain bows respectfully, but she is completely sweating bullets. She mentally freaks out, realizing the Emperor just ordered the elite Imperial Knights to act as a VIP escort for a 7-year-old.